Report for today. It is Friday, May 8th, 2015. I'm Doug Hagmann in studio with my son, fellow investigator, fellow researcher, Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann Hagmann Report. Folks, you're about to hear 3 hours of just great, incredible programming. Tonight, we've got a very special guest. We're going to be talking about the entirety of Jade Helm. I would say, ladies and gentlemen, this show tonight is going to be the definitive resource of the digging deep into Jade Helm. Now, there are a lot of, there's just so many people out there, so many in the alternative media talking about this, but some are getting it wrong, some are getting it half right. We intend to provide documentation through our guest, Mr. Nathan Leal, showing you exactly where and how this originated, connecting this to previous military documents, and Nathan's going to be joining us at the bottom of the first hour. And now, having said that, I just want to welcome everyone, welcome all the listeners to the program. For new listeners, we broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 5 p.m. From 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. And, of course, our home base on the Internet is HagmannandHagmann.com. You spell that with two N's. That's Hagmann, HagmannandHagmann.com. I'm going to spell it all out. And we're simulcast by the Christians United Broadcasting Network. And, folks, you can find us on SoundCloud as well. Smaller audio files for downloading to your portable devices. And with that, Joe, welcome to tonight's program.
Glad to be here. It's going to be a fantastic program. Nathan will be joining us at 8:30.
8:30 Eastern Time. George, folks, are you hearing us? Can you? Are there any audio difficulties?
I was looking.
Because are you?
We look all right.
Okay. Oh, what a day this has been. We are in the process of finalizing the move to the new studios, and right now we're in a hollow room, it seems like, very little equipment. And during the course of the move, of course, Mr. Slippery Hands over here, that would be me,
ripped the cords right out of the being the geniuses we are. Wondered which way they go back.
Where does this plug go? Yeah. So anyway, it's wow. And then let me share something really. This is good too. Okay. I borrowed my wife's. My wife is leasing a vehicle, and it's like an SUV type vehicle. It's an SUV basically. Well, this thing, and guys, I don't know how we do that. I just don't know how you feel about this. I like the cars with the simple cars. I don't need a computer on board telling me what to do. I certainly don't need this constant dinging in my ear for seat belts. Anyway, this vehicle, being newer, of course, and it's leased, of course, for business purposes. But I was moving some equipment, borrowing her vehicle, and the vehicle will sound alarms. Like I said, if you don't have your seatbelt on, it just nags you constantly. If you it's switches and buttons for everything, and you know how I am with switches and buttons. Well, the one thing it doesn't tell you is when a door's open or the hatchback is open, it doesn't beep or ding or warn you. But boy, I'll tell you, if you don't have a seatbelt on, it warns you. Guys, you probably know where I'm going with this, right? Oh my goodness. Okay. I left the hatchback open as I was backing out of this garage type area. And you know the sick feeling in the pit of your gut when you hear the metal twisting, metal on metal, and you know you hit something? Yeah, that happened. I don't know. It was 7:30, 8 o'clock this morning. I'm backing up and I hear this bang, and I mean it was metallic, and then you hear the little pieces fall to the ground. And I was just slowly backing out. And of course, the vehicles today they're made mostly of plastic anyway. Oh man, I left the back hatchback tailgate thing open, whatever you call it, and ran right into the top of this garage. I'll say garage, yeah. Picture a garage, with the automatic door. Oh man, I don't know. It's probably like a gazillion dollars of damage. Oh yeah, and this thing's got one of those cameras. The backup cameras. Well, I don't even look at those because what are mirrors for? Don't you use mirrors? So the vehicle nags you when you're backing up if you don't have your seatbelt on, but it certainly doesn't say anything when you're backing up with the tailgate flung wide open. Oh man, I'll tell you what. And so, yeah, and if that's not bad, and of course, did I took that whole. I wasn't going that fast, but I ended up I hit it just right, and of course it broke the plastic cover over this camera thing, and I don't know. It's probably going to be I don't know. All I know is, I had to go to call Pro Flowers up for my wife because I thought, oh man. So anyway, yeah. So I think my driving privileges have been revoked, and she said, "How could you have possibly done that?" And to be truthful, I don't know. I think it was just one of those. I guess that's why they call them accidents as opposed to purposes, right? Anyway, so that's how my day started, and of course, Joe and I were working diligently to get the studio rolling. Somebody said, "Well, why don't you call people?" Well, we are the people. We're the ones doing it. So, we've got some audio technical people coming later, but this is the grunt work. So anyway, I just thought the guys out there would now stop laughing, okay? Because I know I'm sure you guys have done something similar at some point in your life, right? But my wife's still shaking her head. If she's listening, how did you possibly? How could you not know this thing was the back was open? Well, I don't know. It just happened. So anyway, so life does happen, and on the door, the overhang door, all that is. Oh, it wasn't pretty, folks. It just was not pretty. Anyway, so having said that,
I just want to let you know there's a audio or a YouTube video on Nathan's website.
Yes.
And he sent a snippet of that. We got that uploaded to the studio for him and ready to go.
And the entire the entire video is at watchmanscry.com. And I got to tell you, if you go to Hagmann.com, it's the lead promotional article, lead article for tonight's program. And there's a link directly to the video. It's 28 minutes long. And let me tell you something. I think that it's the definitive video with respect to the documentation to the military and the crossover between the federal agencies, the intelligence agencies, and it's just not the American intelligence agencies either. It's all Western intelligence agencies. So that's going to be a fantastic show with respect to the information that's going to be offered. Very specific information. And that Lieutenant Colonel Lastoria that gave the press conference about Jade Helm to reassure the Americans that, this is just, the conspiracy nonsense out there. People like us talking about this, the conspiracy aspect of it. It's all just, don't believe us. It's interesting because Nathan lays it all out in that video, and it's a very well done video. and he really hits it hard, and he shows you Lieutenant Colonel Lastoria talking, and then he'll show you the background in this 28-minute video, and then he'll show you the background documentation for Jade Helm. And folks, you know, and this is the other thing too. A couple of days ago, boy, was I off. I was off. I was railing. I said, show me the document where Jade is the acronym for whatever it might be, okay? And I said, show me. Go ahead. I want somebody to show me. And of course, having the most intelligent audience in the world, many of you had sent links directly to the documents or the acronym, you know, what it stands for, what Jade stands for. And of course, this was right around the same time. I had not seen Nathan's video at that time, so I take that back. Boy, did I make a mistake? And I apologize for that. I think a good case can be made, even though Lastoria denies the association or that Jade Helm means anything. Jade is an acronym for anything. He denies it. It's right there in documentation. And you know what else? I got to tell you, this goes back to PNAC. There's ties to PNAC. There's ties to the, there's ties all over. This is more than what people believe it is. And Nathan does a great job, too, of tempering and not overstating the case, saying, you know, whether it goes live this go-around or not, it doesn't matter. The what's being done with respect to Jade Helm, what the military is doing, and the integration between the federal agencies and the police departments, as well as the other intelligence agencies. We really have to pay close attention to this, because regardless, I mean, if nothing happens, if end of September comes around and rolls around, or when this exercise is supposedly concluding, which I don't believe it will, it might on paper conclude, or a big portion of it might conclude. However, I think it's going to continue in lesser forms or in different forms. It has to, and Nathan will explain why. Pay attention to this. This is perhaps one of the most important military and intelligence exercises that's ever been done, and it's in concert with PNAC, which is a very frightening project for the New American Century. And Joe, you had done a lot of research on PNAC.
And their connection to 9/11.
Yeah. I mean, what is that? But explain to people what your research has found with respect to PNAC. And
well, off the top of my head, it's been a long time since I had read any documents or anything pertaining to PNAC, but it was a right-wing neocon war-type document that called for, it's the project for the New American Century.
Right.
Paul Wolfowitz, the people under the Bush administration, both Bush administrations were behind it, and the 9/11 Commission.
All right.
And they talked about, a new American century and a new warfare for that American century.
So we can see this going back to the late 20th century, or going back to the late, we'll say to mid to late 1990s. You can see the planning that's now coming to fruition. The planning behind PNAC, and even before PNAC, you can see the groundwork being laid back then, and even before that, but specifically with PNAC, and then the development of PNAC, and then afterwards. Now what we're seeing, and I believe this after talking with Nathan as well off air, I believe what we're seeing are the material fruits of the planning. And this gets into psychological warfare, definitely infiltration, definitely extraction, identifying the enemies of the executive branch. Notice I didn't say the enemies of our country, but the enemies of the executive branch, or who they believe to be enemies, such as those people, believe in the Constitution. And then, of course, using, and this is the other thing that I don't think very few in the alternative media have really talked about the use of the computer programming in this network-centric warfare. You're going to be hearing a lot about that tonight. Network-centric warfare, and different types of sub-programs to Jade Helm that I haven't heard anywhere else, and I think I'm pretty well researched, except that one mistake I made, and for that again I apologize. But Deep Green, that's a DARPA project. But what we're going to see tonight, and what Nathan's going to lay out for you tonight, is pretty startling. So, folks, I would recommend, please, go to Nathan's website. Go to hagmanandhagmann.com. And, again, there's a link directly to the video. Take the 28 minutes. It's well worth it. Take the 28 minutes. And even if you think you know everything there is to know about Jade Helm, you're going to see things, I believe, on this that you didn't know. He lays it all out. So
I want to hit one news article while we were patiently waiting for Nathan to join us. St. Louis residents fight to keep spy agency from taking their homes. I thought this was a very interesting story. North St. Louis is grappling with many problems: underperforming schools, a stubbornly high murder rate, lack of good jobs, dirty vacant lots, and now the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. They have an acronym, the NGA. This is the agency that has released reports on the New Madrid earthquake and DHS to DOD involvement. If you just look up the National Geospatial Agency, you might be able to find some of their publications. They do threat assessments for man-made and natural disasters.
We do have a contact in that agency. I just want to tell you that
it's a newer agency.
Yes.
And
yeah.
Well, at least newer in name to be for me. It goes on to say NGA is a lesser-known cousin of the National Security Agency, has long had facilities in South St. Louis located a short walk from the historic Anheuser-Busch Brewery, but the NGA is now looking to move and has narrowed its list of possible new locations to 4, including one North St. Louis that would require the demolition of 47 homes, which are occupied. Not surprisingly, North St. Louis residents are not welcoming the NGA with the fruit basket. On Wednesday, the local organization Save North Side St. Louis delivered a petition with nearly 100,000 signatures to the NGA asking it to remove the neighborhood from consideration. The charge is led by a 79-year-old Charlerisa Taylor, who has lived in one of the threatened homes for the past 70 years.
Go figure.
She says, we were one of the first black families to move in on this block. She said during a phone conversation, it was 1945 and black families couldn't live in certain areas, but my father was able to buy this house anyway. I don't know what the NGA does exactly, added Taylor, but it sounds bad. Many of the 46 other threatened homes also belong to elderly residents. The city says the spy agency brings in about $2.4 million in tax revenue every year. None of the other 3 possible locations are located within city limits. In February, the Board of Aldermen, St. Louis's version of a city council, passed an ordinance that designated Taylor's community a blighted area.
Right, and this is how these government agencies, whether it's NGA, I mean, you pick an agency, they're classifying the neighborhoods as blighted in particular.
With the area now considered ruined, the city may use eminent domain to seize the property. Shortly after the ordinance passages, the residents, including Taylor, received letters notifying them of the city's interest in acquiring their property. If the city does take the homes, residents like Taylor would, of course, be compensated, but they don't want the money. And it goes on to say it isn't about money. Money can't buy everything. It won't replace the memories and 3 generations that grew up in this big old house, that from the Taylor. But, yeah, just as you said, the city council will cordon off an area or call it if it's a high crime rate, and they can rezone it or use eminent domain, and people might get 70%, 80% of the value. They'll never get the cost of it. But I just thought that was interesting that, especially since the one thing that this National Geospatial Agency is known for, at least in my mind, is the New Madrid fault line, and it's threat assessments about that. I believe that was in the last year's or the year before's threat assessment.
Okay, I understand that. Where else is this going to be taking place, or is this just limited to that area right now?
No, it's just limited to that area right now. They're trying to set up an agency headquarters inside the city limits, and the only way to do so inside the actual city of Chicago or St. Louis is to take these 47 homes and demolish it.
Okay. Well, watch for these things. One thing I've noticed in doing research during this sleepless nights during this move, one thing I've noticed here is the convergence of Agenda 21. And now, does this fall under anything? Has Agenda 21 in your research been invoked under this particular program? Do we?
Well, no, and it's never used by name.
Okay.
I mean, Agenda 21 is never cited as a reason for anything. It's
all right.
It could be. Usually it's wetlands, and the EPA and different government agencies are, as I said, rezoning, issuing. Going through their permits. People are not being able to have the freedom to build in certain areas within certain states. Other people. And government agencies are benefiting from this. We see the National Park Service and other services. What was it? The Land Management Bureau, the one that went on.
Bureau of Land Management, BLM, right?
Those are the people that gobble up the land, and it is tied to Agenda 21, but they'll never say it has anything to do.
So in your research, then, it does have ties. Okay, which does make sense. But I'm seeing the convergence or the application of programs like Agenda 21 with other government programs and what.
Well, that NGA, National Geospatial Agency, definitely does have its ties to Agenda 21. But aside from this implementation of some kind of headquarters in St. Louis, I've never seen them behind any kind of executive action or anything other than issuing threat assessments. They're not, from what I see, an overt. And they say it's a cousin of the NSA.
Well, it's a big cousin. Seriously, we do have a contact within the Geospatial Agency, National Geospatial Agency, and what they had done, and this was going back probably 5 or 10 years, well, more like 10 years ago. What they were doing was recruiting from like the CIA does. They recruit from the cream of the crop in the Ivy League colleges, looking for certain people and then certain types of people. Now, the NGA is quite a it is much of what they do is extremely classified and secret. But it's interesting that they would come out and identify themselves as being the architect behind this. Oh, okay.
There's another piece too that deals with the Baltimore riots, or the what happened there. This is from the New American. Talks about title is Orchestrated Baltimore Riots, just the beginning. Recent unrest in Baltimore may be just the beginning, according to one establishment voice promoting more. Virtually all Americans expect more strife and chaos in the cities this summer, according to surveys. One prominent talk show host said America is in the midst of a civil war, and various agitators are encouraging more violence, looting, and unrest as a means of bringing about change. The establishment's agenda, though it's change towards tyranny, plain and simple. The riots and looting hit the city, brought together a coalition that on the surface at least appears bizarre. The establishment, local politicians who purposely let it happen by ordering the police to stand down, communist agitators, the mainstream leftist media, black supremacists, white supremacists, criminals, and more, all played important roles in forming the unrest and the national reaction, applying pressure from above and pressure from below, and they are not going away.
This is exactly what we're seeing too now. If you're a regular listener to this program, you know that we have done the research and investigation and the analysis. The Baltimore riots are connected directly. The same people who have funded the Baltimore riots, funded and organized the riots in Ferguson. they're planning on doing this on a national level. And in fact, the Black Panthers, the Black Panther leaders, they are calling for war, all-out war against whites. Okay, I don't know whether you saw that or not.
Oh, and on top of that, this paragraph here, it says, among the race mongers who dissented on Baltimore was Al Sharpton, a close ally of the Obama administration who has been demanding national policing and other points on the White House agenda after the establishment media-fueled round of unrest. But Sharpton was hardly alone either, and now black supremacists are pushing a race war narrative and urging people to get violent in order to bring about change. So you have more people pushing for more violence. You have politicians and pundits pushing for a nationalized
but Joe, and folks, I mean, this violence is, the talk is frightening because here, okay, there are two people, two leaders of the new Black Panther Party, Chief of Staff Michelle Williams and King Samir Shabazz. As an aside, I did the only repossession I ever did, and I talked about this on our in Chicago. I talked about this on a previous program. We had to get a hold of a Cadillac, and I can't get into it, but there was something very special about this vehicle. It belonged to this Nation of Islam compound, and no one would touch it. You know, we said, "Yeah, we'll do it." You know, my partner and I will do it. Anyway, I was going here. Chief of Staff Michelle Williams and King Samir Shabazz. The actual vehicle belonged to a relative of Shabazz, and I know Shabazz is a very common name in the Black Panther Party. But anyway, here's what they're calling for. Williams, Williams a few years ago, she claimed that she was going to offer a big bounty on George Zimmerman, dead or alive. You might remember that. Okay. In 2012, when the Republican convention was held in Tampa, Florida, Williams announced that the city was under siege. But now here's what they're calling for. They're calling for blacks to firebomb preschool nurseries, child care centers, so that they can kill as many babies, white babies, as possible. Now, how can they get away with this? I mean, this is ratcheting up.
Is that an old claim?
It's actually a continuation. She came out in 2012 during the Republican convention, made some threats and harassing threats. Is it old? Yes, but she's saying it again. Now they're coming back and reissuing these statements and calling again in the face of the violence against blacks by the police. Now she's saying we have to step this up. So the corporate media will present this as old news, but what they're not telling you is Williams and Shabazz both are now taking this up, ratcheting up a step further too, and working with others, including but not limited to Sharpton and other, and even going further to the left or the Marxist/communist side, and working with others as well. But they're calling for murdering young white, specifically targeting white children. This is not, and you know Sharpton's got a red phone to the White House. You know that other people from the new Black Panther Party have direct contact or indirect contact with the White House. So you know that at the community organizing level, which Obama does best, this is where this is coming from. And we said back in 2008 and again in 2010 and 12 and 13, based on my DHS source, that Obama, the people around him, want to cause a civil war in this country. And this is not just black versus white. This is also economics, the haves versus the have-nots. Obama's team, not just Obama, but the people that he brought in, even at the smaller localized levels, which is the areas that these are most effective. Think of campaign headquarters in your town. Well, they've got a parallel type of operation that exists using the new Black Panther Party and others that's being administrated by people like Sharpton. And I say people like Sharpton. Please understand what I'm saying here. You can listen between the lines, so to speak, I guess. But this is what they're doing. They're attempting to take this year, this summer, to bring about the racial, at least the racial component, and they're hoping, and you can find this online, they're hoping to have it coincide with some sort of economic event or economic downturn, to use that as a force multiplier for their affairs. This is right out of the Saul Alinsky playbook. This is right out of Cloward and Piven. I mean, all of this now is coming into clarity. Everything we talked about, everything that we wrote about, and please go back and read what we've written, and read what my DHS source, for which I took so much heat over, saying, "Oh, you're just listening to voices in your head." Everything that this person said is coming to pass, or we can see it shaping and forming, like with additional clarity. Oh man, I'm going to tell you something. I'm very concerned about this summer and this fall. I don't like to set dates, but I do think that I believe that by 2016, next year at this time, or going into the elections of 2016, I think that America is going to look a lot different. And but I'll temper it by saying this: if it doesn't look a lot different, there will be the mechanics of how things work will be a lot different. And Jade Helm, I just want to also, if I may, I was sent an article. I'm not even sure who wrote this article, but it's been making its rounds on various internet websites. Jade Helm looking for conspiracy. It's not Jade Helm, and this person says, okay, this exercise is not massive. It only includes approximately 2,000 special operators across 7 states over 5 months.
Well,
that's not true.
1,200 per state.
Well,
military personnel.
Right, but when you add in the federal, the federal and municipal, the county, those. I mean, this is a massive exercise. Although they're attempting to downplay this, and of course the exercise is not unprecedented according to whoever this author is. And you notice that a lot of people that talk authoritatively about Jade Helm, they hide behind internet pseudonyms, no names. Or they use if they have any type of video or audio, they use the computerized voice. No, don't do that. But anyway, they're making, in particular, this individual is making this out that if you're against the exercise, you're against the military, the United States military who protects us, and trying to tug on our mental and emotional heartstrings. This is pure propaganda, and don't forget. Okay, you can have multiple conspiracies, if that's the word you would choose to use. You can have multiple events taking place concurrently. A lot of times people don't think big enough. A lot of times we don't think big enough. So I just would urge everyone to think bigger, think on a larger level than what you're thinking right now. And understand that there are numerous. We're at war, or the war has been declared on the the patriotic Americans, shall I say, as well as the Christians, as well as the proponents of free speech and gun rights and the anti-abortion or the pro-life people, the people who want to be good Christians and want to, associate themselves with Christianity. The war is against all of us. And this is a multifaceted war. It doesn't have to be just one. No. And it's not just one. It's against the entirety of the population, and it's heating up now. I mean, it's really heating up. Folks, please take all of this very seriously. I mean, we're essentially right now we are losing. The posse comitatus is gone. It has been gone. The warrantless searches. How far down this road do we have to go for people to understand that America, the landscape of America, has changed over the last 2 decades, and has changed even over the last 2 years. So, please, really understand what's going on. And talking about understanding what's going on, it's our distinct pleasure. We've got with us a good friend of the show, and I like to think a good friend of mine and a good friend of Joe's, Mr. Nathan Leal. Nathan Leal, he heads up Watchman's Cry. If you go to HagmannHagmann.com, you can actually, you can link to the Watchman's Cry website. Nathan's website is right there, and he's done, I would say that he has done more research on Jade Helm than any one particular individual I know. And his website, again, is watchmanscry.com. His name is Nathan Leal. If you're a regular listener to the program, you know exactly who he is. And I got to tell you, the information he's going to give you tonight is second to none. This is his original source stock, or his original research, and my hat's off to him, because he had gone through, in addition to the video he had gone through with me, the different steps taken to his investigation, and he's right on the money. I mean, he's earned his badge and stripes, I'll tell you that. So with no further ado, Mr. Nathan Leal. Nathan, welcome.
Doug, thanks for having me on once again. I remember I called you just a few days ago and told you I found some new stuff, and I really believe that we need to get this out to the people, and I just want to challenge everyone that's listening to try to become knowledgeable about the deeper part of this topic, because I noticed, Doug, a lot of well-meaning people it is exciting. There's a lot of sensation about Jade Helm, but if people just focus on that, and if they don't understand the framework of Jade Helm, it's going to take them away. We know in Bible prophecy that a lot of people are going to be deceived, and they're going to fail. They'll be overcome. They will succumb to the deception. And part of the motive behind Jade Helm is a cognitive thinking battle against the citizens. And so people need to learn this information. Tonight I have so much stuff, and I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be able to get through all of it. So I just wanted to also say that this is an ongoing project where I will be sharing through YouTube videos and then regular articles, my website, as well as when I come on with you. And if I do have enough time, Doug, I am also going to try to put all of this information in in a book, if I can. I don't know if I have enough time, but if I can, I want to do that, and we'll talk about it in the future. But I'm already examining that avenue so people can actually have it in their hands. So if for some reason this thing – now, whether or not it goes live, that's not the point, because this is just the beginning of an ongoing mission for the new direction of the U.S. military. And not only the U.S. military, I want to include the militaries that are allied with us, NATO militaries. For the listeners that are around the world, if they're in the West, in the UK, Australia, Canada, English-speaking allied countries, this is going to involve them too, Doug. This thing is so big, and I believe that it's actually a part of the fulfillment of what we read about in Bible prophecy. Now, to get started, I want to go ahead and share something, Doug, and in doing this, I got to be real careful. I've spoken with you off the air about this,
right?
About some information I was given. I was sent an email, and I have to keep this person anonymous, but they were in the military and they know what they're talking about, and this source is from them, and based on what they said, the United States government knows that martial law and civil war is coming. They know it. And part of the reason that a lot of the Army brass has been fired or sent to early retirement is because over the past few years, the U.S. military has been screening the brass and officers and regular soldiers. They want to know who is going to turn on American citizens. And based on the way that people answered in the questionnaire that they were given, and this has been going on since 2012, they have been either kept or fired. So this individual who contacted me was one of the fired ones, and he was very, very high-ranking. And, Doug, you have a copy of that letter that I was sent? I just want to read it.
Okay. I've got a copy right here. I mean, do you want to read that, or do you want? I mean, you go ahead. If you've got a copy,
I'll go ahead and read it, and I want to talk about it, and I want to get your thoughts on it because, you know, there's a tendency for a lot of people to just sidestep this and say, you know, it's nothing, and then they make fun of us. They throw rocks at you. You guys are overreacting because what they want to see happen is a failure from the alternative media. And if Jade Helm doesn't go live, they're going to consider that a feather in their cap. Look, they're a bunch of fear-mongers. But Jade Helm is not the end result. Jade Helm is the ribbon cutting of a whole new doctrine for the militaries of the West and of NATO. Now, let me just go ahead and read this. This was a response that I received after I was on your show last time where I talked about the prophetic dream where I saw an ambush take place on a SWAT team. You remember that vision I had?
Yes.
And for those that might not have heard it, in this prophetic dream that I have, and from time to time God has allowed me to see those things. He gives me prophetic glimpses, and I've shared them. And in this particular one, I was standing in the middle of a street of an American city. I don't know what city it was, but I have a feeling it was a city in the South. And it was a 3 to a 4-lane street, and it was going in one direction, so it was a downtown area. The buildings were about 4 stories tall. And as I was in the middle of the street, some MRAP vehicles drove past me and stopped in front of me. There was about 4 of them, and the SWAT team got out, and when they were about 10 feet away from their MRAPs, they were going to serve a warrant on one of the addresses in this city. And when they were all away from their vehicle, far enough away from the vehicles so that they couldn't jump back into the vehicles, instantly from both sides of the street, from the rooftops, individuals rose up and ambushed them and started firing on them. Citizens fired on the SWAT team and mowed them all down with weapons. And when I saw this happen, there was about 20 to 30 of these individuals that did this. When I saw it happen in my dream, I started screaming, and I was crying, and I was in shock. I was trembling. I was screaming, "No, do you know what you've done?" And I knew, Doug, that at that moment in time, everything was forever going to be changed in the United States and possibly even other countries, because we now went from those are the first battles from individuals who considered themselves either belligerents or insurgents or Sons of Liberty. I don't know what they were, but they did it, and that changed everything, and martial law started. The Civil War began. So in my dream, I saw that happen, and I want to also say this. I do not know if they were legitimate, patriot, well-meaning militia people. They could have been rogues. I don't know. And I would hope, Doug, that something like that does not happen by the well-meaning. And that's one of the concerns that I do have about a lot of the videos that are out there, the YouTubes, the citizen journalists that are out there reporting any vehicle they see or any flatbed they see with a military vehicle or on trains. They're reporting that. And part of what this could do, Doug, is rile up free citizens who are well-meaning to believe that maybe some regular routine things that do take place, because before Jade Helm came on the map, if you go back every year annually, there's always military vehicles moving around the United States. The
Sure.
National Guard does it. Our U.S. military does it. They paint vehicles, and for whatever reason, it's always going on. So many people could mistake what is routine for nefarious activity, and that could cause possibly a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I need to lay that on the table, and listeners, please think about this. We cannot act out of total fear without rationale, because we could be a part of the problem and cause this thing to start when it wasn't supposed to, and when there really wasn't a threat at the moment. Doug, many people have made mistakes in the past. So that has to be stated. I have to say it because there are individuals out there making YouTubes. Anytime they see a Army transport or something like that, it's placed in the category of Jade Helm. And I said this the last time I was on your program, Doug. I said that we as citizen journalists need to be responsible.
Exactly.
We have to have rationale, and we can't just throw anything out there if it's not entirely true. If we do not vet the source, if we do not vet the truth of what we're reporting, that's irresponsible and it looks bad. So in my dream, these people who ambushed the SWAT team, I don't know what their motive was, but it happens. So eventually at some point in time, something like that could play a role in the future. After I had that dream, then I immediately went to another dream where I was in Arizona. I know I was in Arizona. I was looking out the window of a motel room, and I saw in the street a march of patriots with weapons. They were marching off toward civil war to fight the powers that be, and there were thousands of them, and they were all ages. They were from the very young to Vietnam veterans and everything in between. And I ran out into the parking lot again of this motel, and I screamed to them, please don't do this. Now, for those people that are saying, man, Nathan, you're a wuss, you're a wimp, what's the problem? Don't you want to defend our country? Well, when I have a prophetic dream, Doug, whatever the motivation I have in my dream, whether it's my true emotion or not, that's usually the message that God's trying to share. And in the natural, any red-blooded American, if they saw citizen soldiers marching off to war, there would be a tendency to support it and rah-rah and feel nationalistic and patriotic and say, yeah, we're going to show them. So I do have that part of me inside my veins. That blood flows through my veins. But in the dream, I was telling them no, so that was the voice of God saying, you're headed for slaughter. And in my dream, that's what was going through my mind. You guys are going to be slaughtered. So I was trying to tell them, don't do this, and then one other person broke rank, and they left the parade and came up on the parking lot, and they said, what's your problem, buddy? What are you, a pinko communist? What's your problem? And, of course, that's not what I am, but that's what happened in the dream. So, again, Doug, when this thing does happen, there will be, unfortunately, people that did not want it to happen that are going to be swept into the momentum of what is happening, and as a result, it's going to get ugly, and it's going to be horrible, but there will be no going back from that point. So I just have to say that up front, that there is a deeper element of this. It cannot just be the Ted Nugent, let's go hang them and without asking questions and using the rule of law and, the vigilante posse, don't ask questions and we'll find out later, and we'll let God figure it out. We can't have that sort of thinking because that's anarchy, and if you really want to see what true anarchy looks like, look at Baltimore last week or a few days ago.
Yeah.
So when we take logic and sensibility away from the equation, Doug, we can also become part of the problem also. So that has to be established. Now, after I was on your program and I shared this, I got an email from a forced retirement military person, and this is what he said. He said, Nathan, I listened to your interview on the April 23rd, 2015 edition of Hagmann Hagmann, and after careful consideration of what you said concerning your dreams of patriots firing on SWAT or military teams from above and your dreams of seeing patriots heading off to fight in the West, I believe I should shed some light into what you may have seen. Briefly, I am one of the hundreds of senior military officials who have been forced into retirement after a long and distinguished career. As I am sure you are aware, my retirement and hundreds of others was in reality a purge
of command-level personnel whom the current administration deemed untrustworthy to carry out their unconstitutional orders. So the purge is because these military people are loyal to the Constitution and to America. He goes on and says, they were right. Your concern about patriots heading off to fight is correct, as your assessment that our military will be in conflict. And here it comes regarding the way that the Pentagon found out who would side on which side. He goes on. A Pentagon study in 2012 estimated that roughly, now, listeners, please, if you have a pen and pencil, write this down. And, Doug, I'm going to make an article about this so you'll be able to see it in hard copy. But just look at the numbers that I'm about to share right here. This is incredible.
This is critical, Nathan. I've got the email in front of me. This is absolutely critical.
Okay. A Pentagon study in 2012, that means that they found out from the soldiers' hearts. The study estimated that roughly 60% of active duty Army personnel will side with the American people. That means 40% will side with the government. As will 80% of the National Guard will side with the American people. So now we have 60% Army, 80% National Guard, and now watch this. Around 90% of the Marines will side with the American people. The Navy as a whole will stay out of the fight, choosing to be the last line of defense against foreign intervention. So I guess they're going to stay on their ships in the Pacific, Atlantic, and try to keep us safe.
Right. And
it's widely believed, this is the part that's disappointing, Doug. Here it is. It's widely believed that in excess of 75% of the Air Force will side with the government. So the Air Force is not going to be loyal to the Constitution, or the majority. 25% will side with America, but 75% will not. Okay, now we have the breakdown. Now we have a split in the branches of our military service. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please make note of these numbers. It goes on. What the study says is that the coming Civil War will break down into three sides. Now, this part is also critical, Doug. This is incredible. Patriots will be on one of the sides. The government and those who choose not to take sides but will protect and defend civilians. With anti-aircraft systems, mobile and man-portable, air power will be all but useless. And I assume that what he means by this is, yes, 75% of the Air Force will side with the government. Therefore, they have access to all the planes and the drones and all of that. However, the Marines and the Army will have access to all the anti-aircraft equipment.
That's my assessment as well. Yeah.
Right. So since the Army and Marines will have that, the Air Force will not be foolish enough to fly over us because they'll get shot down. So he says, as a result of that, air power will be all but useless. What we will see is a ground war in the United States, city by city, street by street. Additionally, what is coming will be unlike any civil war in history. It will be very personal. The government will call the patriots terrorists, and they will arrest, intern, torture, and murder suspected terrorist families, whole families of patriot families or militia families. This will result in reprisals which will start a vicious cycle. Now, I'll stop there, Doug. He went on and talked. He said some personal things, but I'll stop there. But, Doug, what we have here is it'll be three sides, the patriots and then the government and then the military. So it's going to be bloody. This thing is going to happen, Doug, at some point in the future. It is going to happen. And the U.S. military, the Pentagon, the DOD, Department of Defense, knows that it's going to happen. And when we look at...
Just by virtue of the study in 2012, I mean, why ask the question if you're not expecting something like this? Nathan, judging from this email, do you think that they routinely ask the question, where you got the answers from, or do you think that this was kind of... this was asked for a purpose. At least that's kind of what I got out of this email, the feeling I got.
Well, I believe this has always been an ongoing question that the military has always needed to know about, because I had a friend who joined the Navy in 1980, and he was in for 10 years, so that was just during the 80s. And he told me that while he was in the Navy, they asked questions like this. In fact, one of the questions that he was asked, and when he was enlisted, the way that he answered shocked me. And then when he left the Navy, he told me he couldn't believe he said it. I mean, it was like he was in a spell. But there's a tendency to feel nationalistic, rah-rah, you're part of the boys' club at the time. But he was asked when he was in the Navy if there was a terrorist who had a suitcase nuclear bomb that was going to blow up the city, and he was holding your mother in front of him as a human shield, would you shoot through your mother to kill him? He was asked that question, and he said at the time that he answered that he would. And then when he got out of the Navy, he said he couldn't believe he said that. So those are the type of situational, ethic, cognitive brain melt that they do constantly to keep people on edge and continually brainwashed. So this thing has always gone on. But this study that this person cited in this email probably was a little bit more defined, and it was definitive not against the terrorists, but now it was actually talking about what you will do in the case of citizens. And I also need to point out, Doug, I see what time it is, and I'm going to bring up, by the way, on my homepage, I have my page of notes. I just started it. I don't have it populated with everything that's going to be on there eventually, but listeners, you can go to my homepage, and it's going to be what we're going to talk about. There's going to be a lot of documents, just like we did last time, Doug, to actual white papers and summaries and military documents that spell all of this out. Well, there is a military document, and during the break, I want to just invite people, if they can, to look for it. It's called the Department of Defense Directive, number 3025.18. So Department of Defense Directive 3025.18, or it's called the Defense Support of Civil Authorities, the DSCA. Yeah. This directive was signed by Obama a few years ago, and this directive spells out how the president will be able to call up the military to use lethal force against citizens. It's in there.
Domestically.
Yeah,
right.
There's a directive, and there's I think a 126-page PDF on explaining the authorities, what authority they have and how they have the authority, how they're going to use it as well. That goes with that directive. I'll have to email that to you once I find it in my files here, Nathan.
Yeah, there's so much. And Nathan, you and Joe both have accumulated so much documentation from the military. I mean, this is in their own words. So, and I just want people to understand that this is not Nathan just spouting off, or Joe or I spouting off. Everything that you're hearing tonight, it's from the government's own pen. So,
absolutely,
indeed, Doug, Joe, I want to say real quick during the break, I sent you that link. So if you can get that ready, and
we have it.
When do you want me to play that, Nathan?
In fact, we'll do that during the break. This coming, or
okay.
You want to play during the break, or do you want to?
No,
play?
Go ahead. That's perfect. Whenever you want, because I want the people to hear it. We're going to talk about it in the next hour.
All right, brother.
All right, we'll go to a break now. You're listening to the Hagmann Hagmann Report with Nathan Leal. His website is watchmanscry.com. Bookmark that site. There is an interactive forum on there, audio and articles that you can read. That there's all kinds of information on various numerous number of subjects. That's watchmanscry.com. Our guest tonight, Nathan Leal. You're listening to the Hagmann Hagmann Report on this Friday, May 8th, 2015. We'll be right back.
Am I reading that poem?
Well, I suppose if you do, that's a good thing, right?
That was pretty. That was beautiful.
Yeah,
that's a good reminder. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, let's continue. Man, where do you start? We were talking about the directive. Yes, I have it in front of me, and of course, when a person reads any document that's a memo or a directive or law or bill, they have a way of using legal speak, so it's hard to know what they're talking about because there's always a reference to a term, or they'll put a little footnote, and then you got to go to the footnote and know the glossary and reference, etc., or else they'll reference a different directive, and then you got to look that one up. So when you look at this one, the Department of Defense Directive 3025.18, it's amazing, Doug. There are many documents out there that are not part of this directive, but they are different directives having to do with, for example, there's one, what to do in a national emergency if we have a nuclear event or some sort of terrorist attack, and then it makes reference to this directive. So this directive is buried in a lot of others, and basically the bottom line is when an event does happen, because I do believe there's going to be a terrorist event, a false flag event, a huge event that's going to change everything, and when that happens, this directive is going to be called upon because it's already on paper. A bioweapon, a nuclear weapon, a mishap, a chemical spill, doesn't matter what it is, this directive is cited in many others. So in this one, though, I have some notes that I downloaded it, I printed it out, and then I looked at some of the wording that it has, and it says it provides guidance for the execution and oversight for civil authorities. And when you go down, it says this directive applies to military departments, the Office of the Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, the combatant commanders, Office of the Inspector General. It names every possible person in authority that can use this and have the authority to be able to use this to use lethal force against citizens. The other thing that this directive includes, it says the directive is a total force mission. It states that in there, and for the person reading that saying, well, what does that mean? Well, I asked that question, Doug. I said, what does that mean? So I looked it up, and total force mission, the DOD breaks down the active components and the reserve components of our military in those respective categories. So the active components are the ACs, which includes active forces of the four branches, Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines. So active components are those. And then the reserve components are the National Guard, the Army National Guard, the Army Reserve, the Navy Reserve, the Marine Corps Reserves, Air National Guard, Air Force Reserve, and the Coast Guard Reserve. That's the reserve components. So between those two, we have all of the military protection for the United States. And this directive, Doug and Joe, it says this directive will use both the active and the reserve components. It will use all of them when this thing goes live. So that means no one's left out. And all of those components will be used to do whatever they want them to do. And then it goes on. It says federal military commanders are provided emergency authority under this directive. Federal military forces shall not be used to quell civil disturbances unless authorized by the president. And, of course, well, that one's easy, right? Obama says, okay, go do it. Then they have the authority. And then it says, in these circumstances, the federal military commanders have the authority where prior authorization by the president, if they cannot make contact with the president, they have the authority and are they're expected to use the authority to control whatever the situation is, to engage temporarily in activities that are necessary to quell large-scale, unexpected civil disturbances. And it also goes on to say such activities are necessary to prevent significant loss of life or destruction of property or are necessary to protect federal property. So whatever the disturbance is, if federal property is under threat, then they can use this. And then it goes on. Now, this is the part that makes you feel real comfortable and warm and fuzzy, Doug and Joe. It says, this includes assistance in responding with assets with potential for lethality. So they can offer their assistance with lethal force, in other words. And the support includes all the toys. Loans of arms, vessels, aircraft, or ammunition. So there it is, ladies and gentlemen. It's already on paper. And, you know, Doug and Joe, when we look at the behind-the-scenes work that Hitler did, when he became chancellor in 1932, he had 7 years to get all of the official legislation on paper. He went through the legal channels.
Yeah, he did.
Got the legislation was passed. He got mandates passed, decrees. He did it all legally, so that no one could argue back and say, "What are you doing?" And it took him 7 years to do it, and then he turned into what we now know in history. Well, Obama is now, how long has he been in there? 6 years and some change.
Right.
So, for some people that say, you know, you guys blame Obama of being this guy, the villain, and he hasn't done it yet, what's the problem? Obama is laying down the framework up to this point. Of course, he is causing the United States to hemorrhage with his crazy bills, but he is laying down the framework so that all the ducks will be in a row, so that when the next phase is called upon, he will have it ready to for service. Now, just in the last few days, a report came out. Actually, I have it right here. It has to do with the partnership, the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Oh, yeah.
Doug, have you been following that? You know, it's real interesting.
Yeah, and I just want to just to reconfirm this or reaffirm this, that Joe has been following it. In fact, he's been giving me the information. What we're seeing develop with this Trans-Pacific Partnership, the resurgence of this as well, is very eerily, well, it's running concurrent with these military operations and the geographical areas. It's important to understand that the geography of the exercises as well as the geography of the TPP in general. So, yeah, I didn't want to get you off track there, but just to reaffirm that this is critical.
Now, there was a report that came out a few days ago. Let me just read portions of it, but this gives a snapshot of what's going on right now in the administration and amongst congressional members and Senate members. Now, if we go back and look back to the crash of 2008, you remember back then when they were trying to pass TARP, how there was a lot of secrecy and fear and threats actually occurring to congressional members we've heard now in the aftermath? Well, that's happening right now with this new legislation. And I have a report right here. It says, if you want to hear the details of the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal the Obama administration is hoping to pass, you've got to be a member of Congress. And you've got to go to classified briefings and leave your staff and cell phone at the door. If you're a member who wants to read the text, you have to go into a room in the basement of the Capitol Visitor Center and be handed it one section at a time and watched over as you read it. This is how they're treating Congress people, Doug. And also you are forced to hand over any notes before you leave. That's how they're treating them right now. And no matter what, you can't discuss the details of what you've read. It's like being in kindergarten, said Representative Rosa DeLauro, who's a Democrat, actually said it. She's become the leader of the opposition to the trade agenda. You give back the toys at the end. For those out to sink Obama's free trade push, highlighting the lack of public information is becoming central to their opposing strategy. The White House isn't even telling Congress what it's asking for, they say, and what it's already promised foreign governments. So right now, Doug, as they're discussing this thing, there's a lot of weirdness going on with it, to the point where Congress people they're afraid. And I don't know what's in it because they won't tell us. And if you try to do some research about it, other countries who are going to be a part of this, and it's basically the countries that touch the Pacific Ocean from North and South America, so Chile all the way up to America and then across the Pacific. You have Australia, I believe Vietnam, and Japan, and some other Asian countries. Those countries are they're worried about it too, and they say that it's going to affect free trade from them. It's going to mess with intellectual property, and it's going to change their national sovereignty with some laws. This thing is a powder keg, and since we don't know what it is, of course, this is just speculation. But Doug, this is the sort of antics that are going on even right now with the commander in chief. So when Democrats are actually saying that it's And when I get emails from military brass who say things are weird and from people who are concerned, right now, Doug, we are in a period in American history that is very, very volatile and shaky. And I believe that we are seeing history not only in the making, but we're going to see history repeat itself. We are watching what Chancellor Hitler did. Nathan, how dare you call him that? Well, that's what he's doing. He's not transparent. He has already illustrated himself to be over and over, Doug, not serving the American people in the best interest of the American people. He has revealed himself to be a sympathizer to the Muslim cause. He has over and over shown lack of empathy and sympathy for the Christians, our Christian brothers and sisters who are being butchered by the Muslims, and not just ISIS. Let me just say the radical Islamic Muslims. Islam is not a religion of peace. It's in their writings. It's not peaceful. And Obama continues to sympathize with them, and whenever there's a beheading, he will apologize to the Muslims, and then he'll get in there and make a speech and say things that just make your jaw drop. And I can't believe he says it, that makes it our fault that Americans are being butchered and persecuted. Who is this guy, Doug? Joe, who is he? Listeners, who is this guy? Well, it's proven already beyond a shadow of a doubt that he's not operating for on our side. He's not. So whatever he's doing with his mandates and decrees, he has a little bit of time left, and in the remaining time that he has, we're going to see even more craziness. So Jade Helm now is an experiment. It's the beginning of a new chapter in American history, and I submit this to you, Doug. I submit that Jade Helm is the beginning of the new way of the U.S. military, but not just the U.S. military. It is a manifestation of what we read about in Bible prophecy. It's so. In the research that I did, I discovered so many things that are disturbing about it. And if you have the ability now to go to my show notes, I want to just segue into this.
All right.
I see how much time we have. We're limited on time. And I started this. By the way, Doug, this is not finished. Listeners, a lot more is coming. I'm going to put notes and links to a lot of the things we're going to talk about tonight. But, Doug, as I was researching this, and I told you this off the air, when Jade Helm starts and finishes September 15th, it is the ribbon cutting to play with the new toys that they've been working on. The computer program, which they really haven't told us, we have been able to find out that there exists the Jade program. That one exists. I have snapshots of the program here. If you scroll down, the Jade program, it's right there.
Yep.
But the Jade program in itself is just one of many military planning system programs. There's several of them. And those things are still in development. And in my research, I was able to find out that that crazy black budget portion of the DoD, DARPA, that likes to invent all the new toys, DARPA is working on artificial intelligence software and new abilities and actually new programming systems, new computer systems that are going to make what we know presently in our present knowledge of computer systems, that they're going to make them look like infants with what they're working on. I have seen some of the preliminary papers of what they're working on, and Doug, the future in the next 10 years, you know, in the movie, and I said this to you off the air, Doug, about Terminator, Terminator 2.
Yep.
When Arnold Schwarzenegger is in that line, I think that was one of the most pivotal parts of the movie, when Arnold, the robot, is explaining why the machines took over, and he says, in 3 years, Cyberdyne will become the largest supplier of military computer systems. All stealth bombers are upgraded with Cyberdyne computers becoming fully unmanned. Afterwards, they fly with a perfect operational record. The Skynet funding bill is passed. The system goes online August 4th. Human decisions are removed from strategic defense, and then Skynet begins to learn at a geometric rate. It becomes self-aware at 2:14 a.m. Eastern Time, August 29th. In a panic, they try to pull the plug, and that's when the machines take over. Well, based on some of the technology they're working on now, they have these Cray computers that they continue to commission. that are able to calculate at speeds that make our little Windows desktop look like Neanderthals. And they're working on those things right now, and this new AI technology is going to be used. And see, if we were to jump ahead to the end of the narrative, and I say this often, Doug, but I have to because I have a biblical perspective, and we know this thing's going to happen. We know that the end times are upon us, and we know that eventually the beast, New World Order, empire system of dictatorship, tyranny, and martial law is going to take over the world. And a lot of people know this, and often preachers will talk about the mark of the beast, and they'll show the images of the UPC code, the barcode, and say, here it is, here's the mark. But one thing that is not really talked about much, I don't see it talked about much or hear it, is the actual AI computer system that is behind the mark of the beast. How smart is this system? What type of control is it able to manifest over the human populations of the entire planet? When we consider that the mark is a worldwide decree, and when we consider that no man can buy or sell no matter who they are, then we have to also include that they're going to possess some sort of computer program that's going to keep track of everything. So the question must be asked, well, what program is that? And then we have to include that program will also be attached and a part of the military control that is occurring in the end times. The successful dictatorships always have a very strong military. We know that.
Right.
The military is able to control the citizens with fear, but not just that. They know all the portions of the military, the populace. They know who's who. The secret police during Hitler's time, the Gestapo, they had records of everybody. And think of this, Doug and Joe. They did it hard copy with index cards. Everything was on paper, but even then they were able to keep track of everybody. They knew the names. They knew who to extract. They knew what people were supposedly guilty of. Well, when we go to the end times and consider what sort of system is going to be able to keep track of all the citizens, then we have to also include in the equation it's going to be some sort of gargantuan AI computer software program that is able to have a database of everything, of everybody, of everyone's history, everything they've ever done. So when we include that in the equation, Doug, then this is where the NSA Spy Central web network enters the equation. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. You mentioned net-centric warfare. I'll talk about that in a moment. But what needs to be established here, Doug, because when we get down to the basics and the foundations of reality, we cannot exclude the spiritual dimension, and we cannot exclude Bible prophecy. We have to include that. So when we go to the end of the narrative and we see that there's going to be some sort of military power and computer program that's able to control every one of us, and if we work backwards from that, that means that they're going to have to make test runs on this new software, and the military is going to have to play with it. And if the end-time New World Order beast is not just going to be militaries protecting borders, but it's going to be militaries controlling citizens and spying on citizens, that means that if we go backwards, military forces worldwide will have to practice using software that incorporates the profiling and the data mining of citizens with military forces and military exercises and operations. That there's going to be a merger of data with special forces. And that is what Jade Helm is. Jade Helm is the ribbon cutting. It's the manifestation of the new doctrine of the U.S. military, but not just the United States, of the West, of NATO countries. And in my research, Doug, I was able to find that the Jade Helm way of operating, if we were to just put the word Jade Helm aside, what it really is the merger of three things. It's the merger of information on citizens worldwide with the cognitive propaganda campaign that we know from the RAND Corporation and Tavistock, and what we see the propaganda machine doing, the Pentagon, what it does with programs on TV, that continue to slowly, with baby steps, allow the people to see the new technology that they have, and also it allows people to see that there's nowhere to hide, and the NSA has your number, and there's no reason to fight it, so get used to it. Part of their strategy is to desensitize the population to accept all of the NSA spying, which, by the way, brings us to a side note, Doug, and we've talked about this off the air. You know the Edward Snowden file leak that opened the can of worms on what's been going on with spying, not just in America but worldwide? You know, Doug, I believe that was done on purpose, and the NSA wants us to know this so that the people can be desensitized by it, so that it won't be a shock. It's the frog in the pot sort of thing, so that we could hear about it released in segments so that we slowly can be used to it and just stay asleep in a slumber. And, Doug, I know that you have your theories on it, but I am suspect over how that whole thing took place. You know, Boone's Hamilton, Boots out, Alan Hamilton.
Yep.
You know, when you think of Snowden, his name, the book Catch-22, you know that Catch-22 comes from a story of from the Air Force. There were some a bombing run, the people in a plane, and one of the persons in the plane gets injured and his guts fall out while they're in the air. And the name of the person whose guts fall out, his name is Snowden in Catch-22. Interesting, right? So
right.
Anyway, that's a side note. I don't want to digress. But what I'm trying to say is the rise of the machine is here, ladies and gentlemen. And Jade Helm is not just a one-act event. It is the prologue to many events that are coming. It is the beginning. It's the introduction. So Jade Helm is not just seeing a convoy of military vehicles being moved around the country. Jade Helm, in actuality, is the beginnings of the new computer program that is merging the military with, as I stated, the information that we know about that they're spying on from the NSA. Now, Doug, you cited the PNAC document at the beginning of the show. I want to, if you have my notes, if you go to watchmanscard.com, it says hit the show notes. I have an excerpt from the PNAC document, Project for a New American Century. When the program is over, I'll put a link to it, and that document is called Rebuilding America's Defenses. And for those that are familiar with this document, most of us have heard that one line, that there needs to be a new Pearl Harbor event, and that's in the document, and that's the one thing everybody remembers. But the theme of the PNAC document, Rebuilding America's Defenses, is not just the new Pearl Harbor event. The new Pearl Harbor event was what was needed to do a bigger thing, and the bigger thing was transforming the military. It had to do with changing the way the military functions, which meant that the U.S. military, in order to transform itself, needed to adapt to new technology and invest in new toys that are dependent on new technology. And the new technology was going to be some of the technology that they had already been playing with in DARPA, but they wanted to bring it onto the mainstream and invest in it, and they wanted to spend a huge portion of the military budget annually on this new technology. And the document even says, one of the handicaps they have or roadblocks that they have in investing in this new technology and transforming the military is that there's no reason to do it. So if the United States started investing in all these new gadgets, it's going to upset the world, and it's going to make our allies worry and ask the question, America, hey, America, why are you investing in all this new stuff? What's up? So in order to have the allies on board with this new technology, there needed to be a new Pearl Harbor event. So the 9/11, which of course made it happen, was the catalyst for the new technology and the transformation. And in that document, let me just read the portion that I have right here. It's from page 50 of the document. After the program, I'll link to it. It says, to preserve American military preeminence in the coming decades, the DOD, Department of Defense, must move more aggressively to experiment with new technologies and operational concepts and seek to exploit the emerging revolution in military affairs. Information technologies in particular are becoming more prevalent and significant components of modern military systems. Doug, that right there, that one sentence that says everything right there. And we're going to go into this, but that right there, of course, when we look back, we can see this happening now with the NSA spying and the billions of dollars that are being invested in the spy network, but it's right here. It was in the PNAC, which was written in the 1990s. Information technologies. These information technologies are having the same kind of transforming effects on military affairs as they are having in the larger world. The effects of this military transformation will have profound implications for how wars are fought. There it is again, ladies and gentlemen. The way that they fight was going to change in the future. They said it back then. That's what Jade Helm is. It's a new way of fighting wars. What kinds of weapons will dominate the battlefield, and inevitably, which nations enjoy military preeminence? That's going to be based on the transformation that is going to be profound. Okay, then we have that famous line. Here it is from page 51. Further, the process of transformation, even if it brings revolutionary change, is likely to be a long one. Absent, in other words, unless some catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. So they knew that taking us to the next level of the spy network and the global information grid and all of the new things that we now know they do, they needed an excuse to do it. And that's where 9/11 came in. And, of course, we could do many programs on 9/11, Doug, but your listeners are smart. The majority of the listeners already know about 9/11. It was I mean, Doug, where do you start and where do you finish with that?
Exactly. You're right on the money. And you know, I like the way you write this in your show notes. And folks, you can go to HagmannHagmann.com, click on the link to the Watchman's Cry, or just go to WatchmansCry.com and click on the show notes. But you write here like a Hollywood script. And I think, you preface your paragraph there with respect to the PNAC document. But that's an important point there, like a Hollywood script. And I think that we are seeing some Hollywood things taking place, and I think that this is being scripted and has been scripted with the help of Hollywood. And I don't want to get out on a tangent on that, but I think you're spot on with your assessment here. Go ahead, sir. I didn't want to take you off track there.
We also already know that the Pentagon has a relationship with Hollywood and with TV programs, and they influence them. They probably even offer some funding to help the programs become produced. But over the years, you see, part of the strategy of a dictatorship is they have to let the people know how mean they are and how scary they are. So slowly they had to brainwash America and allow us to see that they do have the bigger gun and they do carry the big stick and they have the hammer. We're the now, they have the hammer. So over the years, the Pentagon has influenced Hollywood movies. Enemy of the State, that one was how long ago, Doug, right? Eagle Eye with Shia LaBeouf, that one let us know about the Big Brother computer system. The show 24 with Kiefer Sutherland, letting us know that, the Constitution no longer exists and it's to capture that bad man that always wants to explode the shopping mall. So it's needed. So over the years, Hollywood has influenced us to lower our guard. And now that the guard has been lowered, now it's time to take it to the next level. Now it's time to get the people used to seeing Black Hawk helicopters flying around their city and soldiers playing in their cities and firing blanks, because when the real thing comes, then the people are desensitized. All of this is a huge brain rape is what it is. It's a mind rape exercise, Doug. And they needed to do it, though, to reduce the amount of people who would become alarmed and want to do something about it. So by letting it out slowly, the Snowden release did that. It served that purpose. Hollywood movies, and now Jade Helm exercises, all of those put together will serve the purpose to deactivate potential constitutional citizens from being alarmed to just going along with it. And when you paint the picture of the bad man, the Goldstein boogeyman from that book,
Yep.
Big Brother, you need a villain. So the villain is the terrorist, and when you use that word terrorist, domestic terrorist, insurgent, etc., that makes people go along with it. So the PNAC document laid this out, and now here we are. Here we are, and by the way, the PNAC document said it's going to take several decades for this to all come about. Well, I believe the document was written in, I don't know the exact date. Do you, Doug? 97, I think, around there? 96 through 98, around there, 97?
Yeah. It was in the mid-90s, yeah.
Okay. Well, that's almost 20 years now for the transformation. So now here we are, and when we look, as I stated a moment ago, at the biblical end-time beast, the Bible tells us in Daniel 11 that the beast will honor the God of forces, the God of forces, the God of the military. It's going to honor it. And what is it, ladies and gentlemen, especially here in America? And, Doug, I say this because when you take something that is good and then you twist it, the cognitive dissonance that most humans live by, which means cognitive is their way of thinking, dissonance is things that are not following, things that are amiss, inconsistencies. When you take cognitive dissonance and you take a topic that is inconsistent with the way people want to think, most people cannot deal with it. Now, your listening audience, my audience, the awake audience has had to go through that. They had to go through that process where they had to see that the emperor was naked and then admit it to themselves. But facing that and then dealing with it and accepting it is a process. And let me give you the example of what I'm talking about. It has to do with the U.S. military. There is a cognitive dissonance that is attached to the average American when it comes to the U.S. military, especially conservative Christians and conservative Republicans who mean well, who love God, who believe in the Bible. There is still a connection that sidesteps reality when they consider the U.S. military. And this is how the cognitive way of thinking when it comes to the military functions. And it is this, and Doug, we could do a whole show on this. Joe, you know this. Most well-meaning Americans do not question anything that the military does because in their mind, the military is good, and if you're a patriot, you don't question it. And if you're a patriot, you support any operation that they do. You don't question it. And since your sons and daughters and nieces and nephews, grandchildren are in the military, you can't be against it because your loved one's in it. So to question it would mean you're questioning your child's occupation, and then that messes with your head, and no one wants to be upset, so they just continue with that continual emperor's new clothes way of thinking that says it's all good. I'm sure they know what they're doing. They wouldn't be doing anything that's bad. Therefore, it's a holy, and it becomes kind of a holy crusade, any military operation, and conservative Christians think that way. Don't question it. But the problem with that type of thinking, Doug, is because that exists already, ladies and gentlemen, some of you are there. If you're in the military and you're listening to this, you got to admit it. You don't question it because, first of all, if you are enlisted or if you're an officer, you're not allowed to question it because you can't go against the commander-in-chief. He's the boss. So right there's a automatic built-in muzzling tool that exists. But for the people who are retired or they have loved ones, the muzzling after they get out has a way of continuing to keep people from thinking outside the box. When we look at the Bible, it says it says in Revelation 13, who is like the beast and who can make war against the beast. Now, traditionally, there has been the interpretation, which, by the way, there will be a villain. I'm not sidestepping that. There will be a bad leader. Whoever he is, that's another program. Some people are wondering if it's Obama. I guess we'll find out soon, right? But there is a tendency to interpret those words, who is like the beast and who is able to make war against the beast. People interpret that as meaning against the Antichrist, who can make war against him. But let me open up that verse into a much bigger way of looking at it. The beast really means the empire, the end-time kingdom, because Daniel tells us there will be many kingdoms. The Grecian came and went, the Roman came and went, the Persians came and went. The beast is the end-time empire. So when we word it this way, let's look at this. Who is like the end-time empire, and who is able to make war against the end-time empire? One of the reasons that people will say that is because the end-time empire will be so formidable and their military will be so powerful, and somehow the way that the end-time beast rises up, this end-time New World Order empire, it's going to be done so crafty and cleverly that on paper they're going to make it so that each prospective part of the world will get to hold on to their patriotism and nationalism. They're not going to take that away from people. The New World Order beast will be a merger of different regions and different nations, and together they will form this end-time thing that takes over the whole world, but it's formed up of smaller kingdoms. The Bible tells us 10 kings. So when we look at the United States, it will be a part of that. The nationalism and patriotism of the United States will still exist, ladies and gentlemen. So people will still get to hold on to the tendency to not question what the military is doing. They will go along with it. So when we look at the U.S. military exercises that are taking place now, how many people in the general population have no problem with Jade Helm because they say, hey, you know, that Army guy said it's just to keep us safe. It's so that they can practice offshore. So don't question it. And if you do question it, you're a wacko, you're a tin hat wearing conspiracy theorist, and you must hate America. Why don't you move away? What's wrong with you? Hey, buddy, I fought for your freedom. You know, on and on. We know all those posters that people use, Doug. But the thing that many of the well-meaning Christians right now need to consider, and if you might be one of them, listener, please think of this. Each time we have a change in the regime, in the administration, the military gets a new commander-in-chief. They get a new leader. And the commander-in-chief is the one who's pulling the strings, calling the shots. Of course, he has influence, but he's the one that signs on the dotted line, and he sends our soldiers to battle. But he's the guy that does it. Right now, we have a Muslim who sympathizes with the Muslim Brotherhood, who sympathizes with ISIS, Al-Qaeda, etc., who is not doing anything about the butchering taking place. He's doing nothing about it. He's in control of the military. So for the individual who listens to Fox News and he's a diddlehead, he listens to Rush Limbaugh, what are you, against the military? What's wrong with you? Consider this, ladies and gentlemen. The military is following the orders of a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. So Amen. That means that the missions they are sent to are going to be not necessarily in the best interest of the United States. Therefore, it's okay to question the operations. It's okay to question what the toys and the gadgets and the weapons are being used for. And Doug, for the people that do not question it, they're going to fulfill Bible prophecy. The Bible says many will be deceived by the beast. And if it were possible, even the elect will be deceived. And I cannot think of a more powerful, fibrous part of everyone's sinew, Doug and Joe, than patriotism and support of the U.S. military, if you're an American. What is this? Only Christianity or religion can be more powerful, but patriotism toward the U.S. military is such a powerful thing. And for the people who do not question what's going on, they're going to be, unfortunately, Doug, they're going to be deceived, and they may find themselves part of the fodder. Now, I read from the military individual who sent the email about the Civil War that's coming.
That's right.
He stated that there's going to be a breakdown of our military forces. 60% of the Army is going to side with the people. That means 40% will not. See, they will be in a quandary. The people in the military, every one of them, when this thing goes down, they're going to have to choose. They're going to have to decide their own personal preservation over their oath to the Constitution. And they're going to have to decide their own loyalty, or they're going to have to decide where their loyalty lies. And it's going to be a very hard process for them to go through. Doug, I feel sorry for them because this will not be easy. Now, for some of them it might be easy, but for those that do not side with the government, that means they're going to lose their job. They can potentially be detained or sent to Leavenworth, whatever. But to side with the American people it will destroy their careers, many of them. So they'll also have to reckon with that. But when you have 60% of the Army who's going to side with the American people and 90% of Marines that side with the American people, 10% will not. So that will mean it will be brother against brother, and it's going to be horrible. 75% of the Air Force, we could break that one down, Doug. What's up with that one? Well, for the most part, the Air Force is made up of probably more social inept people, computer nerds, people who are very smart, Xbox experts, gamers, those types who maybe do not have, well, I don't want to insult them, but smart people aren't as attached to their emotions. They think logically.
Yeah. And you've got the Tom Cruise type. I mean, think of whatever that, I can't remember the name of the movie now, but the Top Gun, with the Air Force. You've got the those kind of individuals who, I'm not saying it's a bad characteristic, but when you throw it into this particular situation, it certainly could be, or will be. It will be. So when this thing goes down, it's going to be horrible. And by the way, this person didn't include the RCs versus the ACs. We talked about that. The reserve components, National Guard, Air National, all of those. Those are going to have a huge split as well. So there's going to be a tug of war over the machinery, and as this person said, it's going to be unlike any civil war we have ever seen. So, Doug, we also have to include in the equation, ladies and gentlemen, you need to get your house in order so that God will protect you. It's not going to be just as simple as saying this or that. It's going to be ugly and horrible because, Doug, I saw the burning cities in prophetic glimpses, and I saw how bad it's going to be. It's going to be terrible. And then when we consider a civil war taking place, then we have to also include some of the prophecies of Dmitri Duduman. When civil war takes place, that's when the invasion comes. So this thing is shaping up to be a horrible event. Now, I want to talk about, and I have the notes right here, on April 27th, the U.S. Army sent a PR representative to Bastrop County, Texas, to answer questions from concerned citizens. And InfoWars' Alex Jones put out a video of it. It was over an hour long, and people showed up, asked a lot of questions. And there was one segment of this question and answer period where he was asked a question about the logo Jade Helm. And I made a video about it. Ladies and gentlemen, it's on my website. On the right side, it's right there. It's 27 minutes long. I would encourage everyone listening to please watch that video because it goes into detail about some of the talking points of Jade Helm behind the scenes. But he was asked a question, and let me just read. I have a transcript right here of his questions. If you don't, that was what we heard during the break, and the commissioner said, I have a question here from downstairs. Explain the title, Jade Helm 15 logo. What does that mean? Lieutenant Colonel Lastoria said, the logo. The commissioner said, yeah, what does Jade Helm 15 mean? Is it an acronym? And Lieutenant Colonel said, no, it's not an acronym. And the commissioner said, is it code words? And he said, no, there's no code word with it. Somebody made an acronym for it. They were very creative in their thought process on the alternative media to come up with that. Very creative indeed. Let me stop for a second. Doug, does that mean they watch the alternative media? Do they hear what we're saying? Of course they do. Sure.
Are they listening right now? Of course they are. But he turned it around. He did a spin on it. He said someone came up with, from the alternative media, saying that Jade stands for something. Now, we already know that it does stand, the word Jade, Joint Assistant for Deployment and Execution. When you scroll down, there it is right there. I have a snapshot of it. So to say it stands for nothing, was that what he was told to say? And because, Doug, I don't want to slander him. I don't want to call him a liar. But why did he say that when we have it right here? Okay,
exactly.
Let's move on. That's one question I lay on the table. But he said that the alternative media just made it up, but it means nothing. And then he went on to say, much like any other training exercise, you name it as a point of reference so that when anyone comes into my office and starts talking about Jade Helm, I know what they're talking about. The commissioner then said, okay, here's another question. What about the strange image in the center where the sword and arrows cross? Bring that up. Lieutenant Lostoria, he said, yeah, so the arrows, the crossed arrows, as some people out there are from Special Forces, that's the branch insignia for Special Forces. And we've talked about that, Doug, on the last program. I have a picture of it. And the dagger going back through it is the commando dagger from World War II. And we also talked about that. That's the stiletto dagger. And then here he goes. He mentions the clog. He says the clog in there is a Danish clog. It goes back to World War II up in Holland and Norway and the like during the occupied days. Now, this part is what I want to talk about. I want to spend some time on this, Doug and Joe. Listeners, I want to spend some time on it. My video breaks this down. But based on how he answered this question, I have to say that he recreated history, and his example says what does not exist, what is not true. I don't know why he spun history, but we can prove that he made it up. He says, the people who were in the resistance in World War II, now, ladies and gentlemen, please keep that part in mind. World War II is when this happened, according to him. During World War II, people in the resistance in Holland and Norway threw their shoes into the machinery, and the machinery would break. That's where the word sabotage came from. It comes from that activity. So as a result, that's one of the things that Special Forces does in unconventional warfare. So it's traced back to those things. Now, I want to stop right there and just talk about this. Doug, I received a lot of emails when I first put out the previous video showing that the clog, the wooden clog, was given out as part of the clothing to concentration camp prisoners during World War II. Yep. And we know that. We've documented it. It's on our last program. I have all kinds of links, and my previous video also says that. It's on my web page about internment camp, Camp FEMA. That is documented. They wore wooden clogs. So I asked the question about the Jade Helm logo. I asked, why did they make that logo transparent? Why does it look like a ghostly image? I submit this to you. It's because it does represent internments. Now, according to the lieutenant colonel, he said, no, it represents sabotage. When I put out my previous video, not the last one, but the one before that, I received probably 50 emails, maybe even more, from people who said, Nathan, actually that clog means sabotage. And they sent me the link to the Wikipedia page about the sabot or sabo or however you say that word, which explains that during the 16th, and I have a screenshot. You see it right here in my notes? If you can't read it very well, just put that word, S-A-B-O-T, into Wikipedia or into a Google search Wikipedia. It'll bring it up so you can see it, ladies and gentlemen. Or just make the screen big or zoom in on it. I have a screenshot. It says, sabots were in the 16th to 19th centuries associated with the lower class. During this period, in the Industrial Revolution, the word sabotage gained currency, allegedly derived from sabotage, described the action of disgruntled workers who willfully damage workplace machinery by throwing their shoes into the machinery. That's where it came from. Make note of the centuries that are quoted here, Doug and Joe. Do you see it?
16th, yep, 16th through 19th. Yep.
Okay. So that would be a span of several hundred years, but in the 1800s is when they had this machinery, and you had workers wearing wooden shoes. That's in the 1800s. Very important to see what I mean by that, because Lieutenant Lostoria said the term comes from World War II, when the resistance, who was resisting because they were occupied by Hitler, the resistance in Holland and in Norway took off their wooden shoes and threw it into machinery. Now, Doug, did that happen, first of all, according to what we have here in this snapshot, the Wikipedia story, what history says? Did that happen? By the way, apparently that also happened in France also, so he didn't even mention France. He said it happened in Holland and in Norway. So he's off by a few hundred years. Are we on the same page there? Is that making sense?
Indeed it is. And this is interesting, folks, as Nathan goes through this. It's interesting to pay attention to the story as you pointed out, this redefinition or redefining or revising history and why it's important. So go ahead and continue.
Okay, and so I had to ask the question, Doug. Now, first of all, two things. Let me say this other point first. I noticed that when the Jade Helm logo came out, before I released my my video that it is associated with concentration camp victims, I actually discovered that about 2 weeks earlier, but I got sick and I didn't make my video. But during that 2 week span, people were talking about this explanation. It represents sabotage. And I noticed, Doug, this is the thing that I want to say. I can't prove it, but I have to say it, Doug, and I have to ask this question. I noticed that almost overnight in forums across the country, all over the Internet, almost overnight on the same day, and these forums are just regular mainstream military forums or Marine forums, not even associated with the alternative media. They were talking about this. And almost overnight in every one of these forums, they had the excuse of this shoe thrown into the machinery meant, it explained what the clog meant. Mm-hmm. Almost all at once. So all at once, people were reading that it meant sabotage. So first of all, Doug and Joe, I wonder how it is possible that almost everywhere at once, this excuse was given everywhere on the Internet overnight. In other words, was it posted there purposely by paid individuals, shills, trolls, individuals who worked for the U.S. government? Were they spreading this information? And if so, why did they do that? Let me submit this. When we look at the image of the clog, it's ghostly looking. It's transparency, like it's looking at a ghost. I submit this. That clog represents several things. Yes, I will agree with Lieutenant Colonel Restoria. It does represent sabotage because that's what special forces do. So we can't argue with that. However, he made a Freudian slip when he said it's from World War II. Mm-hmm. Because during World War II, the only reference we have to wooden clogs that was very substantial was what I proposed. It was involved in the concentration camps. So the wooden clog comes from World War II, okay, he didn't say this, but concentration camps, where sabotage took place. So right here, when we look at this, Doug, we can't just accept this as, oh, he didn't mean it. Really, if his job is to go around and he's the PR representative for the Army, he needs to know his history. And he has already been briefed on how he's going to explain what needs to be explained. So I submit this. I believe that the clog represents several layers of what the U.S. military is eventually going to do and be used to do here domestically. It's going to be used to, yes, sabotage the attempts of free thinkers and free citizens, sabotage that, but the special forces do not only sabotage. What do they do when we consider their job description? They execute, they kill, they explode, they extract, they arrest, they detain, and they send overseas. They grab prisoners and send them to the Gestapo, Guantanamo Bay, or whichever other locations that are undisclosed. That's their job. Special forces also intern individuals. So that clog represents all of that, the entire picture. I don't see any other way to spin this because based on what he said, how can you? Now, I do see that we're at the top of the hour, Doug. I want to go into the rest of the part. We're going to really get into the meat of more information, so I'll stop there, and I guess we can take the break.
All right.
All right, we'll do that now. Folks, you're listening to the Hagmann Hagmann Report on this Friday, May 8th, 2015. Our guest tonight is Nathan Leal. His website is watchmanscrime.com. Bookmark that website. and check that out daily, as there is updates all the time. From talking about Jade Helm 15, Nathan, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you take it away the rest of this hour.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. When we ended the last hour, we were talking about the interpretation for the clog. I fully believe, Doug, that in addition to them showing their force and showing their weapons, I'm talking about the insignia, the Jade Helm logo. That insignia is related to the Special Forces of the Green Berets. We have the image of it. But I can't get away from asking the question, why did they stick that shoe in there? If it was just to show that they sabotaged, I can think of a lot of other objects that they could have done better. But a ghostly shoe, I fully believe, has to do with internment. We have to include that because they want it to be in open, in plain sight. They love doing that. And when we go on from there, the conversation that took place, we were talking about it in the last hour with the commissioner from Bastrop County, Texas, speaking to Lieutenant Colonel Mark Lastoria, who visited them for almost 2 hours and answered questions about Jade Helm. As we move on, the transcript is on my webpage in the notes. Another question was asked, who did the subtitle, Master of the Human Domain, and what does it mean? And I'm going to answer this in several portions because when he answered the question, I believe that some of the words he used went right over the people's heads because he used words that they have never heard. And there was another portion of the question and answer session where some people asked him questions, and he answered with military terminology that made it almost impossible for them to understand what he was talking about. And I'm going to talk about that in a future video possibly or in an upcoming program. But here was his explanation for the question about Master of the Human Domain. He said, and I quote, "So Master of the Human Domain is a construct that we operate in. It's actually the human domain. It's recognized at the Army level, and what that is there's no longer a linear battlefield after 14 years. Now, make note of that, Doug and Joe. So if you think that there's going to be another great war where it's the Allies against the Axis or even the American-led efforts against the North Koreans or Chinese, that's not how warfare is conducted anymore. I want to stop right there, Doug, and let's talk about this for a moment. What he's basically saying is from this point on, and he didn't qualify it with how far into the future this new way of warfare is, but he basically said that we will no longer have, in the future, a war that involves one state against another. And what that means is like the United States against North Korea or China or Russia, Iran, etc.
Directly.
And I have to question that logic, Doug, because that's pretty bold. I mean, does he have tea leaves that tell him that that's never going to happen?
That's a good question.
So I don't see how that can be true because the Bible tells us that Armageddon is going to happen eventually. That's everyone against everybody. So let's work backwards from there. We also know from many, many prophecies, going all the way back to David Wilkerson, Dmitry Duduman, we're going to have war with Russia and China at some point in the future. So I don't understand how he could say that. So I'll leave that on the table. But then he went on and he said, and the next part of his answer concerns me, and it's very disturbing. And this is where it should concern every listener. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're a free-thinking American who's a Christian who believes in the end times and you believe it's okay to defend the Constitution, this involves you. What he says next. He said, that's not how war is conducted anymore. It's asymmetrical in nature. And what is as a group provided for by an enemy is the human populace. I want to comment on that because this right here explains what's coming down. Now, when I first heard this word, Doug, since I'm publicly school educated, I had to look it up because I don't know everything. So I confess. So I looked at the word asymmetrical, and the Wikipedia page that it brought up explained asymmetric warfare. If you scroll down on the images that I have under the shoe, I have a snapshot of asymmetric warfare. Do you see it, Doug, if you scroll down and see my images?
Got it.
So that if you're following along, this is not Nathan just saying this. This is what it means, and this is what he meant, and this is how it affects all of us. Let me read what it means. Asymmetric warfare is war between belligerents whose relative military power differs significantly or whose strategy or tactics differ significantly. Going down to the third paragraph, the term is frequently used to describe what is called guerrilla warfare, insurgency, terrorism, counterinsurgency, counterterrorism, essentially violent conflict between a formal military, meaning the United States of America, and informal, less equipped and supported, undermanned but resilient opponent. So in other words, ladies and gentlemen, Doug, he admitted it right here. Asymmetric warfare is to fight against, and let's just go down the list, belligerents who are also considered insurgents or domestic terrorists, or can we also include constitutionalists, militia members, patriot group members, Christians, end-timers. We can do this all day long, Doug, but since they have already labeled much of us who are in the alternative media, and since they have already labeled free-thinking Americans who respect the Constitution as domestic terrorists, that's who asymmetric warfare is against. So when he said wars are no longer fought on the linear level, but it's now asymmetric in nature, let's now fill in the blanks. Basically, he's telling us what Jade Helm is about. Special forces fight an oppositional force. They're going to use actors, pretenders, but since he used that term, asymmetric warfare is now how it is, then that means that Jade Helm, the exercise, is against belligerents who fulfill the asymmetric construct, because he said it's a new construct. So that means, this is an admission, Doug and Joe, that Jade Helm is against the people that we are assuming it's against. It's against us. There's no way to spin this. He admitted it. It's against the patriot people who do not like what Obama's going to take this world into.
Nathan, how do you respond to people who would say, well, now this is for practicing for deployment to Iraq, Afghanistan, or some other country elsewhere. It's not intended for the patriot movement. It's not intended for the end-timers or the bitter clingers or whatever. It's not intended for that. How do you respond to that?
When they admitted that they're going to use actors that represent the opposing side, and I don't. This is where cognitive dissonance and the battle against it just needs to be exercised. We have to think outside the box and fill in the blanks and actually use our heads, use our rationale, and use our brains, basically, instead of just accepting it. If we put all of the pieces together on the table, as I've been doing on this program, the commander-in-chief of the military is not serving in the best interest of the American people. We know that now. He's hemorrhaging this country. So since he's in charge, this exercise is one of his projects. It goes all the way to the top. There's no way to spin that one. So that being the case, since he's already signed the directive of using lethal force against American people, we start putting all the pieces together, the resettlement directive that came out, when we put all these pieces together, and then we see that Jade Helm will be against these people who, by the way, they told us this, are going to try to mix in to the local population and not be discovered.
Yep.
Okay, by the way, I'll also answer the question when we look at what he said in the remainder of his explanation. But when we put all of these pieces together, their purpose is capture the flag and find the guy hiding, so to speak. You know, when snipers train, their training is part of their training is not to be found and discovered, and they have to move inch by inch over the course of hours and days. If they get found out, they fail. So it's the same thing. They send pseudo-belligerents into the population of Texas and all these other areas where they're conducting the exercise, and they're going to try to find them. So it is an exercise, ladies and gentlemen, against belligerents. If it's asymmetric warfare and they're practicing on American soil, it makes no sense that they would try to mix in Texas to act like Texans, to dress like Texans, if they're practicing to be in Afghanistan. That makes no sense, because they're not wearing the head dress and, you know, the clothing's different. The accent's different. The way you speak. Just like you say regularly, Doug, you train the way you fight.
That's right.
So this is practicing against the future, the martial law that is coming. Now, I want to say this, and I stated this in my video. I'll throw him a bone, and I will say this. I'll qualify it. It is possible that Lieutenant Colonel Mark Lastoria is not aware of the martial law plan that's coming. He might not be aware of the nefarious Zbigniew Brzezinski plans, the New World Order plans, the plans of the elite. Because further in the question and answer session, someone asked him, is this attached to or related to Agenda 21? And he said, what? And they said, Agenda 21. And he said, sorry, I've never heard of that. Now, and everyone laughed in the room, by the way. So either he was telling the truth or he honestly has never heard of it. And it is possible, Doug, because there are many well-meaning, patriotic military members who don't know about the New World Order plan. They have no clue about it because they're just fed the propaganda, and they stay in that little box of manufactured information, and they're not allowed. In fact, some of them, I believe you reported on it, or Steve Quayle has it, they're not allowed to go to alternative media sites like yours.
Yep.
So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He may not know about it. So when he says it's asymmetric, in his mind he's thinking belligerence overseas, but the Special Forces are practicing so they will be ready when this thing goes down. Now, I want to continue. He then went on and said, okay, where am I? Okay, Lieutenant Lastoria explaining the human domain. And this is the example he gave to explain the human domain. He said, you have a gentleman in the Middle East, we'll call him Abdullah Halik. So Abdullah Halik is able to provide you food when you can't get food. He's able to get you clean water when you can't get clean water. He's able to start up a school in your local community. He's a nice man. Everyone likes him. He's a part of his community. And then one day, Abdul Halik comes in and says, hey, would you mind hiding this anti-aircraft missile for me? And I suppose in this example, he's talking to his fellow townspeople, his fellow Afghans or Iraqis. He says, will you hide this for me? And since they're his friend, of course they hide it. Lieutenant goes on. He had never asked the population for anything before. He always provided. He has worked the human domain, so that's what it means in Lieutenant's example. So the people, the townspeople, since they like him, they take the anti-aircraft missile and they hide it for him. So his way of gaining the trust of the people and having them be on his side, it's population-centered. So then he asks the question out loud, how does the Army counter this, his credibility? How does the Army counter his influence with his townspeople? So when the Army comes in and moves into an area for 3 days or 4 days, he goes on to say, when we come in and we move into an area, how can you instantly pick that apart and figure it out? In other words, how can you find out who he is? How can you find out his address? How do you find out that the bad man who's hiding weapons in the town? That is the human domain we operate in. See, he didn't answer it. He just says they have to go in and find out who he is. Now, let's bring that home. He used an example for the insurgents, the Taliban or ISIS or Al-Qaeda. When we go into a town, we have to find out who the Al-Qaeda guys are, and so we have to win the friendly townspeople and get them to tell us who Al-Qaeda is. Now, on paper, that sounds good, Doug, because we don't want our boys getting shot up by Al-Qaeda, right?
Right.
On paper. In a Hollywood movie,
paper.
On the construct that Americans operate in, and may I say this, in the construct where we do not include all the variables and factors that ignores that we invade, that we occupy, that we're in their city, we're in their town, we go where they live, where we're upsetting their way of life and stirring up everything and killing their loved ones. That's not included in the construct because as Americans, we can't ask those questions because that makes you anti-American. I'm being sarcastic, but let's bring that home now. If we had an opposing force, not the American military, but say Russia and China, who came in and they're occupying us, we would then be Abdul Halik, who, before they showed up, we loved our town, and the townspeople loved us. We got along. It was Mayberry, etc. And then when the Russians come in, the townspeople amongst themselves hide weapons. So when the Russians come in and they start asking the mayor of the city, like we saw in Red Dawn, the puppet mayors, and they ask the mayor, hey, who are the insurgents and belligerents? Tell us who they are. And somehow the Russians find a way of winning over the mayor, whether it's through fear or fear of reprisal for harm to their family, or maybe with rewards or bribes. They are able to convince the puppet mayors who the bad people are. So then you have betrayers in the city hall who are turning names in. They're turning people in. So then what you have is the human domain construct is occurring here in America. So then you have the patriots who say, hey, the mayor is a turncoat. He's against us. He's going to turn us in, so we have to stay underground. So you have that thing going on. And then you have the people who can't decide because they're afraid. And then you have the people who say, well, the Russians are here to help. I never liked Joe Bob anyway, so I'm going to turn him in. You have all of that going on. When we went into Iraq, Doug and Joe, and you might have reported this in the past, we took several pallets of $100 bills with several billion dollars of cash when we went in. And knapsacks of wads of $100 bills were given to certain officers who went all over Iraq, and the $100 bills were used to bribe Iraqis to turn in the bad guys. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And we know that from history. So, of course, when you have an Iraqi who's poor and he didn't like the neighbor anyway, he's going to turn him in. The human domain, our U.S. military, we already know they operate that way. They operate through bribes or threats. So when he's saying when they come into the town, they have to find out the bad men. The entire way of doing this, we've talked about it on several programs, is not only through bribes and threats, it's also through infiltration, where human terrain experts and infiltrators will go in and pretend to be a part of the population. We've talked about this a lot. They will go in and take names. Jade Helm is practicing that. They're going to go in. They have the belligerents, the actors, but then they have the infiltrators who are going to go in and find out where they are. That's part of the practice, too, to infiltrate and find out where they're hiding.
But Nathan, Nathan, the last show you did, or we did together, you were talking about laying the groundwork of infiltration way before the July 15th kickoff of this exercise, and I think that a lot of the the lists that people talk about, the red-blue lists or whatever colors that people might be familiar with, I think that we've seen over the last decade anyway the creation of these lists through infiltration of various groups, especially using our intelligence agencies. And you mentioned that the last show that we did.
Indeed, and let's segue into that now, Doug. Now, I don't have the link yet. I'm going to put it up later after the program. But if you have the ability, your whatever search tool you use. By the way, I'll say this out loud, Doug. My name's Nathan Leal. I'm a Christian. I have a family. I live in Idaho. I believe in Jesus. He is my Lord. He's my shield. I have nothing to hide. When the time comes that my job's done and God says, okay, Nathan, you're done, then I suppose I will either be extracted and done away with, or something will happen, but God will let it happen when it's time. Until that point, I have angels surrounding me, and I have God as my shield and protection. So I'm not afraid to say who I am. I'm not. And I don't hide behind a fake name. I don't hide behind an initial. I don't hide behind some handle where people don't know where I am. I don't believe in that, first of all, Doug. I don't. So because of the prophets, everyone knew who they were. They saw their face.
Yep.
So I'm saying this up front. I have at times gotten emails from people who admonish me or chastise me, and they say, Nathan, you say Google. Why do you want to do that? They know what you're doing. Well, you know what? They know way more than that.
Yeah. That's true.
I have a phone. They're listening right now. By the way, those of you in the boiler room, I hope you're learning some things. So when I'm on your program and I say Google this word, I'm not saying it to scare people. I'm saying it because I'm not afraid. And, ladies and gentlemen, we have to, now, okay, in fairness, when the time comes to go underground, then, yeah, we have to loose lip sink ships, yes. But for right now, this is how I operate. So whichever search tool you use, whether it's DuckDuckGo or some of the other ones that are secretive, or Bing or Google, whatever it is, if you have a computer right now, since I don't have a link, I want to give you a word to place into your search engine to bring up this Wikipedia page because I have to show everybody, and we're going to talk about it, Doug. So the word is network-centric warfare. I'll give you a moment to dial that in and to have that wiki page in front of you because everyone needs to hear this. Now, as I was researching for Jade Helm, as I stated, the web has growing, the rabbit holes have gotten deeper, and so many of the loose strings are now starting to connect, going all the way back to the PNAC documents. The transformation of the military, the new weapons of war that they wanted to invest in, 9/11 made it possible. By the way, the PNAC document also says there will be new military departments that will be formed in this transformation. And look what we have. The DHS, Homeland Security, was formed. So that was also spoken about before it happened. But the architecture that's going to put and bring all the pieces together is a part of the Jade Helm exercise. Jade Helm is the ribbon cutting, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Doug, tell me when you have that page because I want to mention some things.
Go ahead.
Network-centric. You got it?
Yep.
Network-centric warfare. Okay. Network, I'm going to just read it right here and we'll talk about it, Doug. Network-centric warfare, also called network-centric operations or net-centric warfare, is, ladies and gentlemen, please make note of this term, a military doctrine or a theory of war pioneered in the 1990s. Yeah, when PNAC was around, right?
Right.
It seeks to translate an information advantage enabled in part by information technology into a competitive advantage through robust computer networking of well-informed, geographically dispersed forces. Now, that's a lot of words right there. Jade Helm, one of the first words is joint. It's the joint, cognitive joint exercise. We have that again when we've talked about it, but the word, when we start looking at military documents for the new way of fighting, oftentimes we use the word joint, the joining of different forces. And it's not limited to just the four branches of the military, Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, because, of course, in the past they haven't always been together, and they pick on each other in fun and jest. But it's not only that. It's also the joining of the four branches, whether they're active or reserve, with information technology. Very key. This is very important, ladies and gentlemen. Well, how are they going to do that is the question. If you scroll down on this page, Doug, it says background and history, network-centric warfare, understanding information age, power.
Yeah, Nathan, let me stop you real quick. Well, let me stop you real quick and just point one thing out. In 1996, the Joint Chiefs of Staff released Joint Vision 2010. I thought that was interesting. There, if people click, not now, when they after the show, if within that background and history, click on the Joint Vision 2010, and of course that leads you to a 39 interesting number page PDF, and Joint Vision 2010 talks about the full spectrum dominance and the imperative nature or the imperativeness of jointness. Okay, just want to throw that in there. Go ahead. I didn't mean to take you off stride, but I thought it was important.
By the way, Doug, that term you just used, full spectrum dominance, is a very pivotal term because that is also a part of the new doctrine. And what that means, ladies and gentlemen, is from the spectrum of war operations, the theater of operations from peacetime before it starts, all the way to the mop-up and everything in between. That means that the new doctrine doesn't just leave anything to chance. They don't have dominance when they first show up with boots on the ground and then mop it up. They have dominance, and the new doctrine is to have dominance before they even show up in peacetime. That means phase zero. Before everything gets started, They have to have full control before it's. That's very key, Doug, because that's going to play into what I'm about to share. Now, before I state this, Doug, let's put two terms on the table that are very important that most of your listeners know and understand and feel very strongly about: habeas corpus and posse comitatus. Doug, can you make comments about those two terms when it has to do with the military?
To what? I'm not sure. Well,
the limitations that.
Yeah. Go ahead, Joe.
Posse comitatus was, I think, from the 1800s, where it limited any military from being able to function or practice anything on U.S. soil minus the Navy.
And it goes back to the Bill of Rights quartering, or the Constitution quartering of soldiers and homes and what have you. But yeah, but effectively, it's gone. I mean, Posse Comitatus Act, it's gone. Habeas corpus is gone.
Okay, now let's use an example and ask a question. Does that mean that you cannot have a military colonel drive up in a Suburban outside your house and turn on his little gadget and listen to you speak on the phone while you're living at home on American soil? Is he allowed to do that?
Well, no. I mean, not by law, of course not. Not constitutional law.
Okay. Of course not, right? And I'm talking about a military individual, not the CIA. And by the way, the CIA is supposed to be offshore, NSA is onshore, but just like MI5 and 6, offshore, onshore. And this is going to tie into our friends over there as well, those of you listening on the other side of the world. This applies to you. Doug, if you scroll down to the portion that says related technologies and programs.
Got it.
Okay. Very key sentence. The very first sentence pulls the pin on posse comitatus and habeas corpus, throws it into the room, and explodes the Constitution. And right here, it is admitted just how thick and deep this rabbit hole goes and how far along we are and how close we are to the end-time New World Order beast. This is going to say everything right here. Let me read it. The U.S. Department of Defense, DOD, has mandated, that means no choice, it's already in the structure, it's mandated that the Global Information Grid, the GIG, will be the primary technical framework to support U.S. network-centric warfare operations. Now, what does that mean? The new transformation from the PNAC document of the new way of doing warfare, the new doctrine of war that is already established, Jade Helm is going to practice it, involves network-centric warfare that includes information. Right here, we are told that the Pentagon, which includes AC and RC forces, right? Active and reserve, everyone, it includes everyone. The DOD has mandated that they will join forces with the Global Information Grid with their forces, with their operations. Now, if we were to do a search, if you type in Bluffdale, Utah, the data center in Utah, and then type in Global Information Grid into your search bar, Doug, it brings up that the new data center that was just constructed in Utah, the $2 billion, 1 million square feet data center for the NSA, is a part of the Global Information Grid. That's established. So now let's put the pieces together. Now, by the way, Doug, you know what I'm talking about, right? I know you do, but for the listeners that may not know, do we explain it for a moment?
Yeah, go ahead. You might want to.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, when you have the chance, I would encourage you, and I'm going to have the links when I'm finished on there, but Wired Magazine did a story on it. The NSA is building the country's biggest spy center. Watch what you say. That's from Wired Magazine. In the Utah Wasatch Range, in Mormon country, Bluffdale, Utah, they're building, in the little town of Bluffdale, the NSA has become the largest, most covert, potentially most intrusive intelligence agency ever. They are building this build. This is when it was under construction a few years ago. It's blandly named the Utah Data Center. It's being built for the NSA and its purpose. Now watch this, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Doug, keep in mind, the DOD, the military, Special Forces, Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, all of them are going to merge with the grid, Global Information Grid, and this is what the grid does. They're going to merge with this data center that's here on U.S. soil. Its purpose is to intercept, decipher, analyze, and store vast swaths of the world's communications as they zip down from satellites and zip through the underground undersea cables of foreign and domestic networks. That means, it goes on, flowing through the servers and routers and stored in near bottomless databases will be all forms of communication, including the complete contents of private emails, cell phone calls, Google searches, hey, there it is, as well as all sorts of personal data trails, parking receipts, travel itineraries, bookstore purchases, and other digital pocket litter. It is, in some measure, the realization of total information awareness. And may I add this, Doug, the beast.
There you go.
The beast system now exists. And one of the locations is in Utah. And it goes on to say everybody's a target. Everybody with communication is a target. Business deals, stock transactions, financial information, all secrets, confidential communications, documents, it's all in there. The NSA has turned its surveillance apparatus on the United States and on its citizens. Now, the gentleman that was responsible for designing this place, he quit when he saw what it was going to be used for. His name is, he's a 68-year-old gentleman at the time of this publication. His name is William Binney, B-I-N-N-E-Y. You can Google him. And he said he had to quit when he saw what it was going to be used for. And he said they violated the Constitution setting this thing up, but they don't care. They're going to do it anyway, and they were going to crucify anyone who stood in the way. When they started violating the Constitution, I could not stay. So he quit. So his conscience was bothered by it. So, Doug, the Global Information Grid, and you've done programs on this already, that's where they're going to collect everything. So, ladies and gentlemen, if some of you are concerned and wondering if they have your number, it's too late. They got it.
Yes, yeah. There's no going off grid. There's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere to go. And I'm speaking plainly on this. It amazes me that people think that they can just disconnect Nathan, and it's not going to happen. So we need to prepare. Our best efforts would be to prepare everyone for what's coming and how best to fight this, knowing that we can't just simply go off grid.
When the Bible said who is like the beast and who can make war, this is what it's talking about. It didn't just, now when they fired up the generators and the power a few months ago for that data center, that wasn't the only one. There are data centers that are grabbing information all over the country. There's one located in fact, I have the list right here, and pretty much they have the redundancies all over the country. Let me get to it right here if I have it printed out. Excuse me. Okay, I don't have the exact addresses, but it's all over the country, Doug. I will include it with my notes after it's over, but there's several locations where they have redundancies from coast to coast. From Georgia, the Virginias, Washington, it's everywhere. Okay, here, I found it. Here we go. They have the Aerospace Data Facility in Buckley Air Force Base, Colorado. They have the NSA Georgia location in Augusta, Georgia. NSA Texas at Laughlin Air Force Base, San Antonio. They have NSA Hawaii and Oahu, as well as domestic listening posts. And then they have them overseas. They have the one in Bluffdale, one in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, Fort Meade, Maryland, and there's a few others, but I don't want to bore you, Doug. They're everywhere. When we go backwards with the data mining that the NSA has been doing, it goes back not just in the last few years, but it goes back to when AT&T was the long-distance service of choice. AT&T turned over all of the records of long-distance calls, going back many, many years. Verizon's also done the same thing, going back many, many years. So, ladies and gentlemen, every text message that you have done for, I would say, even over 10 years is already recorded.
Yeah,
everything, every search you've done, everything.
That's right. Not just the metadata either, and people need to understand this. It's not. People say, well, it's just the metadata, meaning it's just the basic, the framework. No, you were talking about content as well. That's being retained, recorded, retained, and actually matched up with your. Everyone's got a profile, a digital profile, and the content is part of that.
And speaking of which, Doug, now let's open up the potential can of worms here, because I was talking with you about this off air. Over the years, we have seen Hollywood release various sci-fi type movies that at the time we were going, really? Interesting, cool movie, and then it's over, we say, nah, that could never happen. But we saw Enemy of the State, we saw Eagle Eye, which was a super computer, an AI computer that was self-aware, that used every network, and it was tapped into everything. Cameras at street corners, bank accounts, ATM machines, phone calls, shipping documents. It was attached to UPS, Amazon.com. It was attached to everything. That's what we're talking about here. And when we look at the movie Minority Report, pre-crime, remember that one?
Oh, yeah.
And I believe you said that you've spoken to someone that was involved in that. That is not just fiction.
No, not at all.
They have the ability to profile everybody, and I'm pretty sure, Doug, that everyone's already been profiled. The lists have been made. So when we look at the Deagle, this is a side note, the Deagle website that says the population of the United States is going to be reduced by some crazy number, it says through people leaving the country or through death, however that happens, or through, let your imagination decide, right? But people have been profiled, and when this thing gets going, when the Gestapo machine goes live, they're going to already have the profile for everyone. Now, we've talked about infiltration, obtaining records of people. That is one way and one method they're going to use to find out the names of the guy hiding the missile, as the lieutenant colonel stated. However, it goes deeper than that, because the computer network, when we get back to net-centric warfare, Doug, what does this mean? This is the part that's disturbing. This means that the United States military, which has developed its new computer system, because the PNAC document talked about it, we see the beginning manifestations, the early versions of Jade Helm, and those snapshots I have on my website. Those snapshots are from the 1990s. They have moved forward 20 years since then. So who knows how the graphic user interface looks now, how it appears. But part of the technology that they're working on, I also mentioned on my YouTube video, Jade Helm may not be the only program that they're using, but whatever program they use, it not only allows the commanders to decide in real time how to carry out their operations with the help of the computer. The computer will also help them with the targets, because the computer will have the profile and possibly has already decided the threat level of targets based on some algorithm for some sort of pre-crime operation or calculation they've come up with of labeling everybody. So when Jade Helm, let's bring it back to Jade Helm. When Jade Helm takes place, Doug, they're going to be using a computer program as a part of the mission. It's not just telling the people in a quick debriefing or a quick pre-briefing, okay, here's the target, put on your face paint, rappel out of the helicopters and go grab them. No, it's no longer that. I believe that they're going to be using new equipment, and the commanders are going to have hold of new software and these iPads where they will be able to practice this new form of warfare, net-centric warfare, that's tied into the supercomputer of the beast. I believe that, Doug, based on all of the intel and based on all of the research that I've been able to pull up that's out there, there's no other way that it could look. So it's not just one exercise. Jade Helm is the beginning, ladies and gentlemen. There is another program as well. I included it. It's called Deep Green. DARPA has been working on it for a few years, and, Doug, I shared this with you off air.
That's right.
Deep Green is a DARPA project, and DARPA continually rewards contracts, and it solicits new contracts regularly to make this program lean and mean. And this program, Deep Green, is going to be used. And the reason I'm talking about Deep Green is because it has Jade Green. It's still in there. That's interesting. So the Deep Green program, when it's finally up and running, will allow commanders to have a tablet in their hands, and the tablet will have a camera on it, and the camera will see the commander speak, his face. It will read his lips, because it needs to be able to work when there's explosions going off and bullets firing off. So it can work with his voice command, so it does that, but it'll also be able to read his lips. Or if he wants to just draw on the screen with his finger and draw on the map and say this person goes here and there, this brigade, the platoon, et cetera, moves here and there, it'll operate with the ability to sketch on the screen, as well as to type in the data, as well as maybe some other ways that they didn't disclose. So this is the kind of AI intelligence programming computer programs that they are playing with right now. This stuff is miles in advancement. So they're going to try out Jade Helm and play with all of this new equipment. So, ladies and gentlemen, when Jade Helm comes and goes, the data that they gather is going to be taken back, and they will probably work out the bugs, but that does not mean that the Jade Helm threat will be over. The next operation that goes into effect may not use the word Jade Helm. It may use something else. But the thing that concerns me the most about this, Doug, is I see Bible prophecy in all of this, because the Bible tells us that the end-time New World Order beast is going to be able to control, corral, and use surveillance over everybody that no man can buy or sell. So it's going to have some supercomputer way of controlling everybody. So the Minority Report, Pre-Crime, Eagle Eye, Enemy of the State, all of those movies that we have seen, even Terminator with AI going self-aware, not that it will be entirely self-aware, but we are talking new sorts of technology that is over and above just a few commandos trying to extract someone at their address and knock it on their front door. This thing is Orwellian.
Yes.
So, Doug, I'm presenting the situation here so that people that are listening need to really digest this information. When I think about the ramifications of this, it turns my stomach, because on paper, Doug, without the help of God, I'm not trying to just throw in the towel and give up. I'm not saying that, but the power of this new system is not going to be easy to fight. Now, by the way, real quick, I see we're running out of time. This program is not only going to be used in America. The Five Eyes program, often abbreviated FVEY, is an alliance that the United States has with our allies, the Five Eyes, with Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the UK, and this is another thing, Doug. The donuts from the UK, you know, the surveillance building that they have over there, that I forget the name, the global
GCHQ.
Headquarters.
Right, GCHQ.
GCHQ. Exactly. Ladies and gentlemen, if you type that in, GCHQ, or the Global Communication Headquarters, it brings up the sister that's attached to the hip to the Bluffdale, Utah database. So the UK has their version of it. Australia has their version. New Zealand. Pretty much all of our allies have a listening post that's doing a similar thing. So they are data mining the entire world.
And they're
so
sharing, Nathan.
Exactly.
Right.
Since they have the alliance, they're sharing with one another. And by the way, that's one of the loopholes that the United States may be using to acquire the profiles of individuals in America. The donut from the GCHQ, the one over there in England, is also listening in on all the phone calls here in America. So they exchange information, and they may say, when they're taken to court, if they are, the NSA may say, well, we didn't sniff the records, it was them, and they just shared it with us because we needed to know. This man was bad. He's a militia-trained patriot living over in Texas. and he hates the government, and he's hiding weapons, and we needed to know about him. So that's why we did what we did, and that's why we used domestic measures, even though we're the military and habeas corpus was thrown away. We had to. So, Doug, this rabbit hole is so deep. And I see the clock, but I could talk about this so much longer. But, Doug, this is why, and ladies and gentlemen, this is why, ladies and gentlemen, if you're really concerned about this, there is no way to do this just on the human level. Because this is Bible prophecy. The beast will be formidable, and when it says who can make war, the reason they say that is because they have ears and eyes over every square inch of the world. So how do you fight that? And that's what we are facing. Now, if the beast is not going to go live, if we have 5 or 10 years, I don't know. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know. I know some people think it's sooner. But between now and then, they're going to do test runs. There's going to be Jade Helm operations occur here in America as well as in other places under different names. So when the hammer hits the ground, Doug, and martial law takes place, this is the type of formidable opponent that we're going to have to face. And those are the things that we need to pray about.
Indeed, and we started the program off, Nathan, by saying everyone's got to think bigger. And please think bigger, understand what we're dealing with. And that's why, too, we have guests like you, Nathan. We're so proud to be associated with you, where we look at current events through the lens of biblical prophecy. There's no other way to understand what's taking place unless we use the filter or the lens of biblical prophecy, and you do that so well. And for that we thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Doug. There's a lot to digest, I know, and this is going to be an ongoing project, but we're there, Doug. We are there.
I know.
The ribbon cutting is about to happen. The transformation is here.
Yep. And folks, we're all in this together. You, listeners, us, Nathan, we're all in this together. And there is power in numbers. There's power in prayer, even more power in prayer. But, we have to be, we really have to get right with God and to listen to the instructions. Listen to his instructions, because our lives may depend on it, and certainly the lives of our children and our grandchildren.
Without the help of God, Doug, we're going to perish. So,
Indeed.
Ladies and gentlemen, there it is.
Nathan, we want to thank you so much for taking your time out tonight. And folks, I'd urge everyone to take 28 minutes out of your schedule to watch Nathan's video. Please do that, because it's so important. It really it reinforces and reiterates what Nathan talked about tonight. It's fantastic. Well done job, Nathan, on that video.
Thank you, and God bless.
All right, buddy.
God bless
take
you too,
care.
Nathan.
Thank you. All right, folks, that'll do it for us tonight. In fact, for the week, coming at you next week from our new digs, from our new studio location, and more on that, more on the alternatives that we're plotting out for you next week. We've gotten some emails saying, well, what are you doing and how are you gonna do it, and we'll explain that next week. But until then, God bless, and everyone, reach out to your moms, or your wives, or a special person in your life this weekend, and it doesn't have to be Mother's Day, but since it is, do so. It gives you a reason to do it, right? And but next week, we're a powerful week next week as well. So good lineup. Stan on Tuesday.
Greg Jackson's coming on. Then a week from Monday, Augusto Perez will be on.
That's right.
And we got some other people lined up. We just got to get the date scheduled.
All right. Well, I just want to say God bless. Thank you, everyone, for your time tonight, and hopefully that, I know that, just thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. And until next week, stay safe and God bless.
Have a good weekend.